The sudden occurrence roused Jian Chen from his comprehension of the laws of curses. He opened his eyes and looked at Heya nearby. He smiled happily. Heya had finally broken free from the shackles of God King and stepped into the primordial realm. He had become a primordial realm expert. Master. Before long, the energy around Heya gradually subsided. He stood up and bowed towards Jian Chen with undisguised joy. Has your golden core of laws formed? Jian Chen stared at Heya with brimming interest. Heya nodded. He glanced at the fortune jade beneath him and said happily, "It should have taken quite some time for the golden core of laws to condense as I broke through to the primordial realm. However, not only has this jade shortened my breakthrough time drastically, it has also allowed my golden core of laws to condense quicker. It helped me consolidate my cultivation as an infinite prime in an extremely short amount of time. Master, I'm formally a primordial realm expert now. I'll truly be able to assist Master now." Heya was both overjoyed and excited. He felt deep gratitude towards Jian Chen. He knew that if it were not for Jian Chen's extravagant offerings of priceless heavenly resources, the time till he reached the primordial realm would have been continuously drawn out. He might not even have the opportunity to reach the primordial realm. The primordial realm had once been the cultivation realm Heya yearned for, it was his life's dream. Now, that dream had finally been fulfilled. Yeah. You haven't disappointed me. Jian Chen nodded in satisfaction. At this moment, Heya glanced at the fortune jade beneath him. Undisguised amazement filled his face as he asked, "Master, may I ask what this is?" I feel like not only was the time I needed to condense my golden core of laws shortened as I sat on it, but even comprehending the laws of the world became countless times easier. The fortune jade was a supreme treasure. It was rare and precious, something that even many grand exalts did not possess. Naturally, Heya would not be able to recognize it. It's best if you don't know about it. Jian Chen seemed to be worried. He did not disclose the existence of the fortune jade to Heya. Heya also understood that the piece of jade beneath him was extraordinary, so he did not probe any further. Afterwards, Jian Chen passed on some matters to Heya before continuing his comprehension of the laws of curses. This time, Jian Chen sat on the fortune jade. Under its assistance, his comprehension of the laws of curses immediately became several times faster. Many of the mysteries of curses that he struggled to understand before became much clearer. Before long, Jian Chen jolted slightly, and his eyes snapped open. I've successfully broken through to God King with the laws of curses. I'm at early God King. 4 of the 7 laws have been comprehended to God King now. Only the laws of creation, the laws of fire, and the laws of corrosion remain. The laws of curses really is extremely profound. With the laws of curses, I only need a hair from the target or something they carry around, and I'll be able to use it as a medium to use the power of curses on them from far away, killing them without leaving any traces behind. As a matter of fact, if the target's strength differs from mine drastically, I won't even need any item or medium at all. I only need to think about them, and I can curse them from afar. With my current strength, I would not need to personally step forward to kill someone like Gongjing Xian. I only need to curse him from outside the Radiant Saint Hall, and he'll be dead. Even in an open confrontation, I can curse my opponent with the laws of curses and reduce their strength to only 80 or 90%. Jian Chen could not help but sneer when he thought about the various wonders of the laws of curses. The laws of curses were indeed nowhere near as powerful as his laws of the sword or laws of strength in an open confrontation, but it could achieve many things that the 2 laws could not. It indirectly increased his battle prowess. In different spaces, the flow of time is completely different. I don't know how long I've spent cultivating either. The gateway to the world of Moon and Star will be opened by the Radiant Saint Hall within a year, so it looks like it's about time for me to leave here. Jian Chen stopped cultivating and thought through everything for a while. He placed the fortune jade under Qin Yishuan again before leaving the Inata Tower. After breaking through to the primordial realm, Heya would be able to help Jian Chen quite a bit. As a result, Jian Chen did not leave Heya in the Inata Tower. Instead, he got him to remain within the Divine Hall while keeping his presence hidden so that he could take action at any time. After all, during such sensitive times, he could not use the Inata Tower whenever he pleased. Jian Chen stowed the Inata Tower away and entered the endless swirling mist with Donglin Yanxue. The swirl was clearly a spatial passageway similar to a teleportation formation. Jian Chen felt like he had stepped into a completely different world when he stepped into the swirl. However, this feeling only lasted for an instant before the landscape around him cleared up. He had arrived in a beautiful forest. A single moon and star hung in the sky above his head, shining with resplendent starlight and moonlight. Jian Chen knew he had returned to the world of moon and star when he saw the single moon and star above. The world of moon and star was actually the world of grand clarity mentioned by the artifact spirit. This world had been the territory of the artifact spirit's master, the Saint of Grand Clarity, 2 eons ago. However, after such a lengthy period of time, the world of Grand Clarity no longer bore its past glory. The Tao Union Saint's curse also permeates the world of Grand Clarity. Not only has the existence of the curse weakened the world of Grand Clarity, but even the vicious beasts here are affected, thought Jian Chen. He closed his eyes to sense his surroundings. Although he was unable to find the curse left behind by the Tao Union Saint in the past with his current level of cultivation, he had grasped the laws of curses after all. Naturally, he could sense something blurry. The reason why the vicious beasts here are protected by the world and can demonstrate power beyond their level of cultivation is probably due to the Saint of Grand Clarity. Although the Saint of Grand Clarity is dead, he was still an expert who had basically become like the laws. Before he passed away, his supreme will influenced this place, setting down some kind of law. The reason why the intelligence of these vicious beasts is limited is probably related to the Tao Union Saint's curse. Jian Chen seemed to understand many hidden facts. The world of moon and star no longer seemed as mysterious to him. If I gather the 10 droplets of essence blood from Grand Exalt so that the artifact spirit can break his curse, I will become his master. If that happens, doesn't that mean I will become the master of the world of moon and star as well? Jian Chen murmured seriously. He carefully studied the surroundings, and his expression gradually became strange. Chapter 23:16, Encountering Qing Shan again, 1, but even if it's like what I imagined, who knows how long it'll take before I can become the master of the world of moon and Sunday. Collecting 10 droplets of essence blood from Grand Exalts is not an easy feat. Jian Chen dismissed his thoughts and no longer dwelled on the topic. He lowered his head to observe Donglin Yanxue. Donglin Yanxue lay in his arms. Her eyes remained closed, as she was completely unconscious. She was not aware of the world around her at all. Her wounds haven't worsened, but they haven't improved either. Now that the mist is gone, she should awaken very soon, murmured Jian Chen. He looked around him before flying off in one direction. Since Donglin Yanxue was still unconscious, he did not need to continue hiding his strength. He immediately hurried off with his full speed, flying into the depths of the world of moon and star. At the same time, he used the laws of space. He moved extremely fast under its assistance, crossing 1,000 or even 2,000 kilometers in each instance. 10,000 kilometers was only a matter of a few seconds to him. Although I don't know how much time has passed, I need to cover as much ground as I can before Donglin Yanxue awakens so that I can avoid Qing Shan. Although I don't fear Qing Shan, it's impossible for Donglin Yanxue to continue to remain unconscious. Once she wakes up, I won't be able to fight anymore, or I'll expose my identity and lose the chance to enter the Tower of Radiance. I can only hope that Qing Shan has already left the world of moon and star now, Jian Chen thought. As he hurried with his full speed, he paid attention to Donglin Yanxue at all times. As soon as she showed signs of waking up, he would need to slow down. Jian Chen moved with lightning speed. The powers of space wrapped around him as if he had fused with space, allowing him to demonstrate extreme speed. In just a short period of time, he had appeared several million kilometers away. Suddenly, Jian Chen came to a halt. He stood in a rocky canyon and stared straight ahead. A radiant Saint Master in white robes lay on the ground 100 meters away. Most of his robes were soaked in blood, and he was completely dead. He was an ice-cold corpse. Jian Chen arrived before the corpse and looked at the familiar face. He recognized this radiant Saint Master. He was one of the protectors who had come in with Donglin Yanxue. However, when they were hunted down by Qin Shan towards the end, he had abandoned Donglin Yanxue and fled by himself. Jian Chen felt no sympathy towards the death of this radiant God King. At the same time, he had been expecting these people to die. Qin Shan had entered the world of Moon and Star to erase the candidates who were undertaking a trial here. However, with the grievances between the martial soul lineage and the Radiant Saint Hall, these protectors would still face death even if they abandoned their candidates to flee. I wonder how many protectors are still alive in the world of Moon and Star, and if the 4 other candidates are all dead, Jian Chen murmured softly. However, he did not leave the corpse behind. He stowed it in his divine hull. Now that the immortal devouring orchid was gradually maturing, it would need more and more corpses to devour. Instead of abandoning the corpse of the radiant Saint Master to the vicious beasts here, he would much rather use it to nourish the immortal devouring orchid. Afterwards, Jian Chen changed the landscape so that it seemed like a vicious beast had passed by to cover his traces before leaving. Once the world of Moon and Star opens up, the elders will definitely scour this entire place. It's better if I'm cautious at such a sensitive time. Jian Chen continued on his way with Donglin Yanxue in his arms. As he proceeded, he found the nests of many vicious beasts. Perhaps due to the strange mist, all the nests were empty. The vicious beasts that lived there had already fled far away, and they still had not returned. Clearly, the vicious beasts were extremely fearful of the mist. Even after the mist dispersed, they still had not returned. There are quite a few radiant origin pearls in the territories of the vicious beasts. However, every single one of them has been placed there purposefully by elders. They have a clear record of the number, so I can't take any of them. Jian Chen felt that it was a pity. He could sense the pure origin energy of radiant saint force within the radiant origin pearls. If used to cultivate, it would greatly benefit any radiant saint master. Before long, Donglin Yanxue finally woke up. As soon as she did, Jian Chen slowed down. He traveled at the speed that a radiant saint master with a one-colored soul core should possess. As a result, he felt like he had become a snail compared to before. This is the world of Moon and Star. Changyang, how did we made it out of the mist? Donglin Yanxue asked as soon as she roused. I don't know. I just kept on walking, and we made it out. The mist is very strange. Its appearance unsettled the vicious beasts. Didn't you come across any dangers in there? Donglin Yanxue was curious. She had fainted very quickly after they entered the mist, so she had no idea what had happened in there. There weren't any. Perhaps the mist poses a threat to the vicious beasts, but not to us. Jian Chen casually made up some lies. The mist was actually a fusion of the artifact spirit's power and the powers of the curse. He believed that no one knew about its existence apart from him and the sword spirits. The mist shouldn't be that simple. If I make it out alive, I have to report this to the elders. Jian Chen carried Donglin Yanxue and covered ground for a day before finding a cave to rest in. He acted like he was recovering. Fortunately, we didn't come across any vicious beasts along the way. However, who knows if our greatest problem, Qin Shan, has left or not. I hope he has departed from the world of Moon and Star. Donglin Yanxue leaned against the cave wall powerlessly. Currently, she was very worried. Due to the strange mist, many vicious beasts had fled the region, so it became a large, safe expanse in the world of Moon and Star. She had stopped worrying too much about the vicious beasts. However, Qin Shan's existence made her uneasy. We probably stayed in the mist for a long time. The world of moon and star should open up soon. Perhaps Qin Shan has already left, Jian Chen said as he acted like he was recovering. But very soon, his expression changed. His powerful soul had already detected Qin Shan's presence. Even though Qin Shan was not giving off his terrifying presence purposefully, he was not trying to conceal it either. He currently flew in a straight line towards Jian Chen. Oh no, Qin Shan is actually still in the world of moon and star. Not only is he here, but he has even found my precise location. Just how did he achieve that? Jian Chen's heart sank. He looked at Donglin Yanxue who sat nearby, and the light in his eyes flickered. Donglin Yanxue was still conscious right now. As soon as he started fighting, he would directly expose his identity. He had considered knocking Donglin Yanxue unconscious, but once she woke up and thought about it slightly, his strength would still be exposed to her. After all, Donglin Yanxue had a peak four-colored soul core. Even though she was injured, she could not be knocked unconscious easily by a radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core. As a result, he would basically be telling Donglin Yanxue that he was not as simple as a radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core if he did that. Chapter 23:17, Encountering Qin Shan again. 2. Do I really have to expose myself? Jian Chen glanced at Donglin Yanxue in an undetectable manner before looking outside the cave. The light in his eyes flickered as he weighed the advantages and disadvantages. However, a sliver of surprise flashed through his eyes shortly after. Although he was still 1,000,000 kilometers away from Qin Shan, the latter was like a lantern in the dark to Jian Chen, as he did not conceal his presence at all. Consequently, Jian Chen could clearly sense his location at all times. At this moment, Jian Chen sensed that Qin Shan had actually stopped 1,000,000 kilometers away and did not get any closer. Qin Shan clearly knows our precise location, but he hasn't come. Instead, he's watching from afar. What is he trying to do? Jian Chen was puzzled by Qin Shan's actions. After a moment of hesitation, Jian Chen looked towards Donglin Yanxue and said, "Rest here for now. I'll go check on the situation outside." With that, Jian Chen left the cave. Donglin Yanxue leaned against the wall powerlessly as she watched Jian Chen leave. She had mixed feelings. Jian Chen condensed a pair of radiant wings first after leaving the cave. He traveled 10,000 kilometers with a speed that matched his identity as a radiant Saint Master before exposing his cultivation as a fighter and flying directly towards Qin Shan. He moved extremely quickly, crossing 1,000 kilometers in a single instance. A while later, Jian Chen appeared before Qin Shan. He stood 100 meters away. Qin Shan sat on a rock with his legs crossed. He seemed towering like a mountain, giving off the feeling that he could hold up the sky. A powerful presence revolved around him. "You've come." Qin Shan looked at Jian Chen calmly. In that moment, he seemed like a dormant volcano. He seemed calm on the surface, but he hid astonishing power deep down. Jian Chen frowned slightly. Originally, he thought his battle with Qin Shan would continue, so he was already mentally prepared to fight Qin Shan. However, when he saw Qin Shan again, he sensed no battle intent from this supreme God King at all. He sensed no killing intent either. He actually became rather puzzled about Qin Shan's intentions. "You and the candidate, Donglin Yanxue, have already vanished for 8 months. I have a secret technique that can find all the radiant Saint Masters in the world of moon and star. I searched the entire place several times during those 8 months. Let alone radiant God Kings, even many elders do not have the ability to avoid being found by me, but you and Donglin Yanxue truly vanished. It was like you were no longer in the world of moon and star. I only found your traces again recently." Qin Shan looked at Jian Chen calmly. He seemed to be studying him closely. Jian Chen stood with his hands behind his back 100 meters away. His presence was sharp, making it seem like an invisible sword had condensed around him. He radiated with cold sword chi as he said, I never thought you would have a secret technique that can find all the radiant saint masters in the world of moon and star. In other words, all the radiant saint masters that have entered this place are done for because of you? Aside from Donglin Yanxue, the candidates are all dead. I've killed 41 of the 44 radiant god kings who entered this place as well. Although Qin Shan's knowledge of the radiant saint hall could not be described as complete, it was close. He knew a lot. He looked at Jian Chen deeply and continued, originally, I planned on slaughtering all the candidates and radiant saint masters who entered the world of moon and star so that the radiant saint hall would have to go without a chosen saint this generation. It would be an extremely awkward matter to them, and it would be utterly humiliating. However, your existence has changed my mind. It's not that I can't find the 3 remaining radiant god kings. I can kill them without any difficulty. However, I've decided to spare them because of you, so they can leave here alive. Qin Shan, we don't know each other, so why are you sparing them because of me? Jian Chen asked. Qin Shan smiled mysteriously and replied, it's for a very simple reason. If everyone in the world of moon and star dies aside from you and Donglin Yanxue, it'll become a mystery why the 2 of you were able to avoid being hunted down. Those elders or even vice leaders will definitely look into the matter. Even if you can explain it, there'll be increased risk of exposure under their investigations. But if I leave some more people alive, it'll cover you even better and disperse the doubts of the elders. They'll believe that you survived due to luck. Are you helping me? Why are you helping me? Jian Chen asked in confusion. Qin Shan stood up. He stared at Jian Chen with shining eyes and said seriously, that's because you're a part of our martial soul lineage. Ever since the ancient times, our martial soul lineage has treats one another like siblings, like we're a family. As long as you wield martial soul force, you are a successor of our martial soul lineage, regardless of your identity or race. You are someone blessed by the heavens. You possess martial soul force. Even though it's still extremely weak, that cannot change the fact that you're a successor to our martial soul lineage. As a result, we aren't enemies. We're close brothers instead. Jian Chen was taken aback by Qin Shan's reply. He knew he possessed martial soul force, but he did not know the martial soul lineage hid aside like that. That's absurd. I may possess martial soul force, but I have no ties with your martial soul lineage, said Jian Chen. You're wrong. Every single person who wields martial soul force is created by the world. That's the same as radiant saint masters. Whether a person has the potential to become a radiant saint master is determined the moment they're born. It's clear-cut, unlike fighters who can cultivate their way up from being mortals. Even ordinary people with no talent at all can change themselves through heavenly resources and various other means, nurturing themselves after they're born. As a result, there's a saying that radiant saint masters are naturally created. Our martial soul force follows the same principle, except it's much more difficult to give birth to someone with martial soul force. Every single person who possesses martial soul force is an existence blessed by the heavens, and in each aeon, it's impossible for these existences to exceed the single digits in number. It's exactly because of how few of us there are that we're secretly protected by the world. The world has formed a special law, secretly guiding and uniting the wielders of martial soul force. Originally, I was the same as you. I cultivated alone and wandered the saints' world alone. But in the end, out of pure chance, I happened upon the martial soul mountain. And it's not just me. Even my senior brothers and sisters on the martial soul mountain and the past seniors who have already passed away all became members of the martial soul mountain through various means. There have been no exceptions in history. Qin Shan arrived before Jian Chen and stared at him with brimming interest as he said, perhaps this secret arrangement is a form of protection from the world. Our martial soul lineage is a unique legacy. We have limited members, and it's impossible to acquire the usage of martial soul force at birth. We can't break through to Grand Prime either. As a result, the martial soul lineage is an extremely frail legacy in the saints' world. The heavens wants us to gather together, for us to unite and stand strong. Chapter 23:18, Martial Soul Mountain. I'm wanted by quite a few powerful experts right now. If you let me become a member of the martial soul lineage, aren't you afraid of me bringing you trouble? Jian Chen asked. He knew Qin Shan would be able to understand what he was hinting at and the matters that were involved. With Qin Shan's wit, he had already realized Jian Chen's true identity when they fought. Although members of our martial soul lineage cannot break through to Grand Prime, you must never underestimate us. We only have 7 people, but we fear no one on the desolate plain aside from the Celestial Sword Saint. None of them can threaten us. Even if all the peak experts band together, we can just camp on the martial soul mountain. As long as we stay there, even the Celestial Sword Saint won't be able to do anything to us. Let alone the Celestial Sword Saint, even existences slightly more powerful than him won't be able to enter the martial soul mountain. I think you'll be in dire straits once you become surrounded by the peak experts of the desolate plain because of the Inata Tower, and even if you flee the desolate plain, they'll search for you endlessly. However, as long as you reach the martial soul mountain, they won't be able to do anything to you, Qin Shan guaranteed with great confidence. How powerful is the martial soul mountain? How can it stop the Celestial Sword Saint or even existences greater than the Celestial Sword Saint? Jian Chen's face changed. The Celestial Sword Saint was an existence that deterred even the Azure Ping King from setting foot on the desolate plain. The martial soul mountain is where members of our martial soul lineage reside safely. It's exactly because of the martial soul mountain that our lineage is able to exist throughout history and not perish. The only problem is that the martial soul mountain can only be treated as our last line of defense. It protects our lineage from perishing, but it cannot be taken around by us. Qin Shan looked at Jian Chen with undisguised admiration and continued, I know you've joined the Radiant Saint Hall under a fake identity and protected Donglin Yanxue during the trial between candidates to enter the Tower of Radiance. Indeed, the Tower of Radiance is a supreme treasure of the Radiant Saint Hall. It was left behind by a sovereign of the world from the Radiant Saint Hall who had become on par with a Grand Exalt. It hides a great fortune for Radiant Saint Masters, and all the cultivation methods and radiant arts that have existed come from there. Even everything that the leader and vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall know come from the Tower of Radiance. It's an endless treasure trove and a place that can alter the fate of any and all hallowed Saint Masters. But I must tell you that the great organizations gathered on the desolate plain have already begun to look for you through blood tests, so as long as you remain on the desolate plain, you will be found sooner or later. If you return to the Radiant Saint Hall with Donglin Yanxue, you will face the risk of being exposed. Once you're exposed, I think you know very well just what you will be facing. Do you have a better way for me to enter the Tower of Radiance? Jian Chen remained calm. He had been expecting this. Our martial soul lineage opposes the Radiant Saint Hall. This is a grievance that has accumulated from our seniors with each generation. We can no longer reconcile, so I can't help you enter the Tower of Radiance. However, as the 8th successor of the martial soul lineage, what you truly should be controlling is martial soul force. You don't need those cultivation methods in the Tower of Radiance. Although some cultivation methods in there are extremely powerful, enough to be described as world-shaking, you're not a regular hallowed Saint Master in the end. And the successors of our martial soul lineage cannot break through to Grand Prime even with the greatest cultivation method from the Tower of Radiance, so there's no need for you to take all this risk to enter that place. Leave with me and return to the martial soul mountain. That would be the safest and most reliable thing to do. Qin Shan looked at Jian Chen with shining eyes and did his best to persuade him. The cultivation methods and knowledge on comprehension from the past seniors of the martial soul lineage are there. They're the greatest treasure of our martial soul mountain. They can allow you to gain a clearer recognition of martial soul force and allow you to grasp the method to make martial soul force grow. You'll be able to use these resources as you wish if you return to the martial soul mountain with me. Jian Chen immediately became tempted. As he had never found a suitable cultivation method for martial soul force, his martial soul force remained at a rudimentary level. It was so weak that it posed no threat to God Kings at all. He had considered creating his own cultivation method for martial soul force, but that would require lengthy experiments and verification. It was easier said than done. The time he had used to grow up to his current level was extremely short. It had only been a few hundred years. He had basically spent all of that time on his chaotic body and the laws of the sword. He had placed no time or effort into creating his own cultivation method for martial soul force. As a result, his martial soul force remained the same as before. It had not grown at all. But now with Qin Shan's appearance, he finally obtained an opportunity to make his martial soul force grow. Naturally, it was a tempting offer. But in the end, Jian Chen still shook his head gently. He turned down Qin Shan and said, "I've spent so much effort hiding in the Radiant Saint Hall just to enter the Tower of Radiance. Now that the Tower of Radiance is basically a step away from me, how can I just give up on it? I won't give up on the Tower of Radiance." Qin Shan did not try to persuade him anymore after seeing how Jian Chen had made up his mind. He said, "I'll teach you a technique. When you want to come to the Martial Soul Mountain, you can use this technique to sense its location. Our Martial Soul Mountain isn't located on the 49 Great Plains or the 81 Great Planets. Instead, it drifts through the vast outer space. It's very difficult to find the Martial Soul Mountain without its precise location given your strength. As our Martial Soul lineage has extremely few people, each addition is a huge matter. As a result, I must let my 6 seniors know about your appearance. As for the legacies for martial soul force, they're all mental imprints. You can only accept them on the Martial Soul Mountain, so I can't help you with it." With that, Qin Shan left. He ripped open the space of the world of moon and star through a special method, forming a spatial tunnel. He vanished through it. Jian Chen did not leave immediately. He sat down to properly digest everything he had learnt from Qin Shan. Only then did he return to the cave where Donglin Yanxue was. Donglin Yanxue sat alone in the gloomy cave, leaning against the wall powerlessly. She stared straight at the entrance. She was alone after Jian Chen's departure. Injured and basically unable to protect herself, she immediately became nervous and unsettled. Uneasiness filled her heart. Dazed, Donglin Yanxue could not help but think of the days when Jian Chen had carried her as they fled through this world filled with danger. Against Qin Shan, the 8 radiant god kings that she should have been able to count on the most abandoned her without any hesitation, fleeing for their lives. She was left her alone and helpless. Yet, Chang Yang, who was clearly the weakest, always remained by her side. Even when she had now become a burden, he still did not abandon her, going through thick and thin together instead. This deeply touched Donglin Yanxue. These matters also allowed Donglin Yanxue to truly see what kind of person Jian Chen was. At this moment, there were a series of footsteps outside. Donglin Yanxue immediately became anxious as she called out, "Who is it?" "It's me." Jian Chen's voice rang out from outside. With that, he entered the cave. Donglin Yanxue immediately became relieved when she heard Jian Chen's voice. She asked, "How's the situation outside?" "It's all peaceful." Jian Chen sat back down where he was before. The light in his eyes flickered as he said in thought, "The strange mist scared away all the vicious beasts. Even though the mist is gone now, the vicious beasts still aren't bold enough to return to their territories, so I didn't come across a single one when I checked the surroundings. We were trapped in the mist for a very long time earlier. Although I don't know how long it was, it seems like it was almost a year. The gateway will open again before long. We only need to wait here quietly. But the greatest threat to us is not the vicious beasts. It's Qin Shan." Donglin Yanxue did not lighten up at all. She had already given up on searching for radiant origin pearls. She only hoped to leave here alive. Qin Shan might have left the world of moon and star. After all, so much time has passed. If he doesn't leave and the elders of the Radiant Saint Hall flood in when the gateway opens, he'll be done for, Jian Chen said calmly. That's just your guess. What if Qin Shan hasn't left? Chang Yang, I feel like we'll be slightly safer if we hide even further away, Donglin Yanxue said in worry. All right. Let's continue on our way then, Jian Chen was helpless. In order to avoid Donglin Yanxue's suspicions, he could only fly further away while carrying her. Now, Donglin Yanxue no longer rejected Jian Chen like before. When Jian Chen carried her, she actually experienced a strange feeling. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, the year-long trial had come to an end. With Elder Mu Zhong at the lead, over a dozen elders stood in a single line on the stage within the sacred hall. Of course, since the Radiant Saint Hall was a peak organization on the desolate plain, they had far more elders than that. Only a portion of them stood on the stage. The various lords of the peaks gathered below the stage. Some hallowed Saint Master who were not Radiant Saint Kings but possessed extraordinary status were there as well. Jian Chen's junior sister, Bai Yu, also happened to be one of them. The year has elapsed. Senior brother is finally going to come out of the world of moon and star. I wonder what kind of world it is. I have to properly ask senior brother when he comes out. Bai Yu stood in the crowd and stared at Elder Mu Zhong. Her face was filled with eagerness and some excitement. I hereby announce that the year-long trial in the world of sun and moon has ended. Which 3 of the 5 candidates will be eliminated will be decided by the number of radiant origin pearls they've obtained. Now, let's open the gateway. As Elder Mu Zhong called out, the ancient seal in his hand immediately emitted a powerful pulse of energy. He waved it at the sky, and the space there immediately pulsed. It twisted into a gateway. The gateway has been opened. Come out, candidates. Elder Mu Zhong called out. His old voice boomed through the gateway, echoing in the world of moon and star to a range of 1,000,000 kilometers. Elder Mu Zhong was the oldest elder in the Radiant Saint Hall. Not only did he hold great prestige, but he was also one of the 3 strongest elders. He was equivalent to a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, making him only second to the 8 vice leaders in terms of status. As the gateway opened, all the radiant god kings gathered below looked at the gate in the sky and began discussing. It has finally ended. I wonder which 2 candidates out of Gongjing Xian, Shide, and Donglin Yanxue will move on to the next round and contend for the position of chosen saint. Isn't it obvious? It has to be Gongjing Xian and Xian Bin. After all, they were the first 2 to condense a late 4-colored soul core out of the 5 candidates, not necessarily. Although Gongjing Xian and Xian Na were the first, Anda and Shide aren't weak either. They also have late 4-colored soul cores. How can you forget about Donglin Yanxue? You can't forget that her strength skyrocketed in the past 2 years, basically breaking through a minor cultivation realm each year. In just 2 short years, she went from an early 4-colored soul core to a late 4-colored soul core. It was completely illogical. Donglin Yanshue's abrupt advance was probably through relying on something foreign pulling her up. Her foundation is nowhere near as firm as Gongjing Xian's or Xian Bin's. They can't be compared. Don't forget that there's Chang Yang beside Donglin Yanxue. Although his cultivation is weak, he's still someone related to Vice Leader Xian Zhan. Who knows what trump cards he is hiding? If he did all he could to assist Donglin Yanxue, we really wouldn't know who would place first in the first trial. As they waited patiently, the Radiant God Kings began an intense conversation around the 5 candidates. The elders on the stage all looked at the gateway eagerly. Time passed second by second. The gateway was gaping, but unexpectedly, no one emerged. There's something off, Elder Mu Zhong frowned. His eyes seemed to shine as he stared straight at the gateway. The unusual situation suddenly made him uneasy. Elder Lu Shui, Elder Xia Feng, go into the world of moon and star and check on the situation immediately, Elder Mu Zhong said to two elders beside him sternly. Immediately, two elders rose up. The laws of the hallowed descended, and with a flash, they disappeared into the gateway. All the peak lords gathered around the stage seemed to sense that something was off as well. They all calmed down as they stared straight at the gateway. Very soon, Elder Lu Shui and Elder Xia Feng returned. They landed on the stage with ugly faces and said grimly, "Horrible news. We can't sense Elder He Tian's presence at all, and we found Elder He Tian's blood and the traces of a battle nearby. Elder He Tian might have met a bad end." "What did you say?" Elder Mu Zhong's face changed drastically. Chapter 23:20, Heavy Losses. It was not just Elder Mu Zhong. Even the other elders lost their usual composure. Their faces became extremely ugly and grave. "Impossible. We've screened through all the vicious beasts in the entire world of moon and star. The few vicious beasts that are at the primordial realm have all been slain by us. There are only existences with battle prowess at God King. It's definitely impossible for these vicious beasts to pose any threat to Elder He Tian, that's right. It's impossible for a vicious beast to threaten He Tian. Even if one of them had broken through recently and reached the primordial realm, they won't be He Tian's opponent. What exactly has happened in there? Why haven't we received news from Elder He Tian? Did something huge happen in the world of moon and star such that even Elder He Tian couldn't contact us in time? Oh no, the 5 candidates are still in there." The elders on the stage all called out. Their faces changed rapidly as they became extremely grim. They felt an ill omen. "All elders, enter the world of moon and star immediately. Even if we have to dig deep, we have to find out what has happened. Scour the entire world of moon and star. We must search for the candidates who took part in the trial. It doesn't matter whether they're alive or dead, I want to see them. Go." Elder Mu Zhong called out. His face had darkened from anger. He was basically furious. The Radiant Saint Hall would have a chosen saint once every millennium. This was an ancient tradition of the Radiant Saint Hall that had been maintained for who knows how long. All the candidates for the current generation had entered the world of moon and star to undergo a trial, and they would select the chosen saint based on the results. If all 5 of them met their end, would that not mean the Radiant Saint Hall would have to go without a chosen saint? Although this would have no impact on the Radiant Saint Hall's strength at all, they were still a renowned peak organization on the desolate plain after all. If they really did face an awkward situation where they had no chosen saint, it would be extremely humiliating. They would be disgraced. Immediately, all the elders on the stage aside from Elder Mu Zhong entered the world of moon and star. The huge square fell deathly silent. The radiant god kings gathered there all realized that something unexpected had happened to the trial this time. They all stood below the stage as they waited quietly. The atmosphere was rather suffocating. Before long, 2 elders flew out from the world of moon and star. One of them carried a bloodied corpse. They carefully placed the corpse on the stage and said sorrowfully, "Elder He Tian has passed away." Unsurprisingly, the corpse belonged to Elder He Tian, who watched over the world of moon and star, serving as the last line of protection for the 5 candidates. **T. Elder Mu Zhong's heart sank completely when he saw Elder He Tian's corpse. His face became extremely grim, and he immediately sent a sliver of the senses of his soul into the depths of the sacred hall. Very soon, several other elders flew over and landed on the stage. These elders all wore black clothes, and their eyes shone with cold light. They were the upper echelon of the disciplinary and penal halls in the Radiant Saint Hall. It's martial soul force. Elder He Tian has been slain by a member of the martial soul lineage. From the wounds, it's probably Qin Shan of the martial soul lineage. Only Qin Shan out of the 7 of them needs to fight Elder He Tian for so long to kill him. The elders of the disciplinary and penal halls said emotionlessly and coldly. Their eyes shone with killing intent. Another one of our elders have died to Qing Shan's hands. Let's go and properly search the world of moon and star, an elder from the disciplinary hall growled. Qing Shan has committed monstrous crimes. We cannot spare him. The elders from the two halls surged with hostility as they entered the world of moon and star as well. It was also at this moment that elders began to flow out from the world of moon and star. They carried out corpses one after another. All of these corpses belonged to radiant god kings. They were the protectors of the candidates. They had all died to Qing Shan's hands. These corpses were scattered across the world of moon and star, but under the personal search of the elders, they had retrieved the corpses one after another. Looking at the corpses that only increased on the stage, Elder Mu Zhong's face sank even more. Surging fury and terrifying killing intent bubbled within him. Gongjing Xian is dead. At this moment, another elder flew out from the gateway with a corpse. He was heavy-hearted. To no surprise, the corpse belonged to one of the 5 candidates, Gongjing Xian. Heavens, it's actually Gongjing Xian. Gongjing Xian is actually dead. Gongjing Xian's death immediately caused an uproar below the stage. Senior brother, you have to be safe. You have to return alive. Within the crowd, Baiyu paled. She clenched her hands as she prayed inside. She was extremely worried. Anyone could tell that something major had happened to the trial in the world of moon and star this time. She was uncertain whether her second senior was still alive. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure appeared. 2 figures silently arrived on the stage. They were Xian Zhan and Mo He of the 8 vice leaders. Greetings, vice leaders. Their appearance immediately made all the radiant god kings below bow. Even Elder Mu Zhong on the stage bowed as a greeting like everyone else. The gazes of the 2 vice leaders were fixed on the corpses on the stage. Their faces sank. The vice leaders held great status in the Radiant Saint Hall. They rarely made an appearance. Even something as important as selecting a chosen saint was completely left up to the elders to handle. The vice leaders would never ask about it personally. At most, they would pay the slightest bit of attention secretly. But now, with the deaths of so many protectors and a candidate, even the great vice leaders had been alarmed. The elders of the Radiant Saint Hall radiated with powerful presence in the world of moon and star as they moved through the air with lightning speed. They used the powerful senses of their souls to pierce the sky and earth, scouring the entire place. All the vicious beasts in the world of moon and star, regardless of strength, shrunk up in their nests. They all trembled in fear. At the same time, Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue sat quietly within an extremely well-hidden underground cavern several tens of thousand kilometers away. Now, Donglin Yanxue had already settled down from her original unease. She had become confident that Qing Shan had left since they were not found after so long. She believed she could leave here alive. Changyang, how long is there until the year ends? Donglin Yanxue asked gently. During the year of hardship, Jian Chen had remained beside her the entire time. They had truly gone through thick and thin together, causing Donglin Yanxue to hold special feelings for Jian Chen. As a matter of fact, she began to rely on him ever so slightly. It should be soon, Jian Chen said at ease. He remained unflustered the entire time. This was just his natural bearing. He had no idea that the presence he gave off would leave a sturdy, reliable impression in Donglin Yanxue's heart. And at this moment, the cavern where the 2 of them hid suddenly shook. The thick earth above them had been blasted apart by a powerful force. Radiant Saint Force shone with dazzling light, dyeing the gloomy cave white in a single instance. A white-robed, middle-aged woman hovered in the air, looking down at them. Even though she stood high up, she showed no arrogance at all. Instead, she clearly became relieved as she gazed down. Master. Donglin Yanxue raised her head instinctively. When she saw the middle-aged woman, she immediately became overjoyed. She called out and tried to stand up. However, she was still injured, and she had been incapacitated long ago. Not only did she fail to stand up, but she even staggered and almost fell over. Fortunately, Jian Chen had fast arms and caught her in time. The middle-aged woman was one of the elders in the Radiant Saint Hall as well as Donglin Yanxue's master, Mu Shui. With a flash, Mu Shui appeared before Donglin Yanxue in a single instance. Her face was filled with undisguised delight as she said in great relief, "As long as you're alive, as long as you're alive. I had thought you," as if Donglin Yanxue had found the only person she could rely on. She hugged Mu Shui tightly as she sobbed slightly, "Master, soon after we entered the world of Moon and Star, Qing Shan of the martial soul lineage appeared. He hunted us down. I had even thought I would never get to see you again." "I know. Yanxue, there's no need to be afraid now. We already have many elders in the world of Moon and Star. They're searching for Qing Shan everywhere. Once we find him, he's dead for sure," Mu Shui said gently, but Jian Chen clearly detected heavy killing intent in her voice. Clearly, this was killing intent directed towards Qing Shan. Not only did Qing Shan's intrusion on the world of Moon and Star get in the way of the selection of the chosen saint, but he had injured or killed the 5 candidates as well. This made the Radiant Saint Hall furious. "Let's go. Let's leave. Although your wounds are severe, you'll be able to recover very soon as long as we return to the Sacred Hall," Mu Shui said to Donglin Yanxue. Then she glanced at Jian Chen who stood there silently and said rather amiably, "Chang Yang, thank you for taking care of Yanxue these days." Afterwards, Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue left the world of Moon and Star under Mu Shui's lead, returning to the Radiant Saint Hall. Many corpses were piled on the stage now. Not only were there over 30 radiant god kings, but even the corpses of the chosen saints amounted to 3. Out of the 5 candidates, Gongzheng Xian, Shide, and Enda were dead. Only the fates of Donglin Yanxue and Xian Bin remained unknown. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Radiant Saint Hall became extremely suffocating. Even the faces of the 2 vice leaders had darkened. At this moment, another elders flew out from the gateway with a corpse in hand. He placed it down gently on the stage and said painfully, "Xian Bin is dead as well." In that instance, the gazes of Xian Zhan and Mo he became piercing. Everyone could clearly sense a terrifying killing intent, enough to destroy worlds, begin to accumulate within the 2 vice leaders. Elder Mu Zhong's face became extremely pained as well. He murmured in a daze, 4 of the 5 candidates are already dead. It looks like Donglin Yanxue has met her end as well. Are we really going to go without a chosen saint this time? No. Not all of the candidates are dead. At this moment, a cry rang out from the gateway. Mu Shui flew out and beside her were Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue wrapped in radiant saint force. Yanxue is still alive. Mu Shui directly landed on the stage with Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue. The radiant saint force dispersed and immediately exposed Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue before everyone. As soon as he saw Donglin Yanxue, Elder Mu Zhong's despaired eyes lit up with hope again. Even the faces of the 2 vice leaders eased up slightly. Clearly, a single candidate was worth far more than the radiant god kings in their eyes. After all, once the Radiant Saint Hall lost all of its candidates, its ancient tradition would be broken in this generation. The humiliation would be immeasurable. Before long, a second group of survivors were found by the elders. 3 radiant god kings hiding in an extremely distant region of the world of Moon and Star had managed to survive this disaster as well. Of course, the 3 of them only survived because Qing Shan had spared them. His intention was to reduce the suspicions towards Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue's survival. Afterwards, the world of Moon and Star was investigated by the experts of the disciplinary and penal halls. They wanted to find Qing Shan's method of entering the world of moon and star. As for Jian Chen, Donglin Yanxue, and the 3 surviving radiant god kings, elders personally visited them to learn about the situation. Jian Chen answered their questions about the world of moon and star selectively. Everything he said only included what he had experienced when he was acting like he only had a one-colored soul core. He disclosed an extremely limited amount of information. Chapter 23-22, Running out of time. Jian Chen only had a one-colored soul core, so they obviously did not go into too much detail with their questions. The elders believed the 3 surviving radiant god kings could help them understand what happened better. Fantastic. Senior brother, you actually made it out alive. You have no idea at all. When I saw so many powerful peak lords dead, I thought even senior brother met his end. Bai Yu immediately appeared beside Jian Chen as soon as he emerged from the sacred hall. She was still shaken. Oh right. Senior brother, what exactly happened in the world of moon and star? Did you really encounter Qing Shan of the martial soul lineage? Bai Yu raised her head slightly to look at Jian Chen. She was extremely curious. Why do you care about that? You better cultivate properly instead. Becoming powerful as soon as possible is crucial for establishing yourself. I'm just curious. Just tell me, senior brother. Originally, the trial in the world of moon and star should have only been the first stage of the competition. After this first trial, 3 candidates would be directly eliminated depending on how many radiant origin pearls they had collected. The second stage would be a competition between the 2 remaining candidates to decide who would become the chosen saint in the end. Only then would the competition come to a close. But due to the sudden changes to the situation in the world of moon and star, only Donglin Yanxue managed to survive out of the 5 candidates. She became the only candidate in the Radiant Saint Hall, so the second stage naturally became unnecessary. Donglin Yanxue had also formally become the chosen saint of the generation. Once she became the chosen saint, not only did it mean an elevation in status, but it also meant the Radiant Saint Hall would nurture her for the next 1,000 years without sparing any effort. As a result, the position of chosen saint was heavily coveted by all Radiant Saint Masters in the Radiant Saint Hall. It was an opportunity for them to evolve. Thanks to the assistance of the elders, Donglin Yanxue recovered from her wounds in under a day. 3 days later, the formal ceremony for inheriting the position as chosen saint began. As Donglin Yanxue took up the position of chosen saint, Jian Chen had already returned to the soaring clouds peak. He sat there as he stared at the sacred hall that stood above the clouds quietly. His gaze was deep. Basically 99% of all the low-level Radiant Saint Masters have had their blood tested in the Radiant Saint Hall, and they possess blood medallions now. However, the examinations in the Radiant Saint Hall are becoming stricter and stricter. The blood medallion is gradually evolving into a symbol of status. It looks like I really don't have much time left in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jian Chen thought as he sat on a rock outside his dwelling. He had already comprehended the laws of space to God King, so his understanding of space was extremely deep. His vision could pierce through many things. Even without using the senses of his soul, he could see 1,000,000 kilometers away. As a result, although he had never taken a single step away from the soaring clouds peak during these 3 days, he knew many of the matters that had happened in the Radiant Saint Hall. He could clearly see the many Radiant Saint Masters carrying blood medallions and could also see the envoys of the Radiant Saint Hall check the blood medallions of each and every low-level Radiant Saint Master under the watch of fighters from outside. All people who had not gone through the blood test, regardless of their status or background, would be forcefully tested. Currently, he truly felt that time was pressing. The time that remained for him was becoming lesser and lesser. At this moment, Jian Chen's expression changed slightly. He looked at the 3 black-robed envoys flying directly towards the soaring clouds peak with an azure-clothed fighter. Jian Chen could not be more familiar with the group. They were one of the small groups responsible for holding the blood tests. I can't run into them, Jian Chen made a quick decision. He drifted off the rock. Concealing his presence and erasing his traces, he left the soaring clouds peak in the opposite direction, avoiding them. Soon after Jian Chen's departure, the 4 people arrived on the soaring clouds peak. One of the envoys asked, "Is disciple of the soaring clouds peak, Chang Yang, present? Why are you looking for senior brother?" At this moment, a white light shot over and stopped before the 4 of them. It revealed Bai Yu. Bai Yu had just come from the sacred hall and was about to go find Jian Chen on the soaring clouds peak. She just so happened to run into this group. Chang Yang still hasn't gone through the blood test. "We've naturally come to carry it out," said a black-robed envoy. "Oh. I just happened to be looking for senior brother to discuss our experiences with cultivation. Come with me." Bai Yu nodded and went to Jian Chen's dwelling with the 4 people. Bai Yu directly touched the barrier outside the dwelling and called for Jian Chen. Obviously, she received no reply. Strange. Isn't senior brother on the soaring clouds peak? Or is he in secluded cultivation? A while later, Bai Yu frowned and wondered to herself. The 3 envoys and the fighter stood nearby. They did not become impatient at all. If that's the case, we'll just wait here then. All the other disciples below God King have undergone the blood test in the Radiant Saint Hall. We just need to check Chang Yang now, said an envoy. If it were in the past, they would have never had the patience to wait there. They would even destroy the formation and barge into the dwelling. But ever since Jian Chen exposed the fact that he held Vice Leader Xian Zhan's medallion a year ago, his status had changed in the Radiant Saint Hall. These envoys obviously did not dare to offend Jian Chen over a small matter like this. Jian Chen hid in the clouds several dozen kilometers away. He saw everything that happened on the soaring clouds peak. With his powerful senses, he even heard everything the envoy said. He immediately became stern. "I never thought I would already be the last one. I can't return to the soaring clouds peak," Jian Chen frowned. After a moment of thought, he suddenly looked towards the sacred hall before rising up and flying towards it. By the time Jian Chen arrived at the sacred hall, the ceremony had already ended. The lords of the various peaks gathered in the square had all dispersed. Jian Chen held Vice Leader Xian Zhan's medallion and passed through the strict security smoothly, directly arriving at Donglin Yenshue's temporary residence in the sacred hall. Even the peak lords were forbidden from approaching the chosen saint's residence without permission. However, with the medallion, Jian Chen could even see Vice Leader Xian Zhan whenever he wished, let alone entering the chosen saint's residence. It had to be mentioned that Donglin Yenshue's treatment had improved drastically after she became the chosen saint. 2 female disciples who seemed like servants stood beside the entrance to her residence. They were at Donglin Yenshue's disposal at all times. "I want to see Donglin Yenshue," Jian Chen directly stated his intentions to the 2 female servants. Chapter 23-23, The Tower of Radiance opens. This is the chosen saint's personal residence. The 2 female servants became troubled. They had no idea how to turn him away. The 2 of them were hallowed saint masters with 5 colored soul cores, making them equivalent to gods. However, they were extremely careful around Chang Yang despite his 1-colored soul core. They were afraid of offending him. Clearly, they knew that although Jian Chen's cultivation was limited, he had the support of a vice leader, so his status was extraordinary. At this moment, the door opened. Donglin Yenshue walked out gently in her attire as the chosen saint. She looked at Jian Chen, who stood outside, and mixed feelings flashed through her eyes. After hesitating slightly, she dismissed the 2 female servants and said gently, "Chang Yang, come in." With that, she turned around and returned to her residence. But in the instant she turned around, her face seemed slightly unnatural. However, she returned to normal very soon. Jian Chen did not think too much about it. He directly entered Donglin Yenshue's residence, closing the door along the way. Why have you come looking for me? Donglin Yanshue looked at Jian Chen with her shining, black pupils. When can we enter the Tower of Radiance? Jian Chen directly asked. You've come looking for me because of the Tower of Radiance. Not because of anything else. Donglin Yanshue stared straight at Jian Chen and replied with more questions. The Tower of Radiance is extremely important to me because it contains all the cultivation methods and knowledge of cultivation from the seniors. It has a direct correlation to my future accomplishments. As a result, I hope to enter the Tower of Radiance as soon as possible, Jian Chen said seriously. Do you only see the Tower of Radiance? A sliver of disappointment flashed through Donglin Yanshue's eyes. Jian Chen was slightly surprised by that. He glanced at Donglin Yanshue deeply and said, Indeed. For a spot into the Tower of Radiance, you should know just how much time and energy I've spent. Changyan. Donglin Yanshue called out as she stared straight at Jian Chen with her limpid eyes. Her voice became slightly shrill as she said quickly, I really don't understand. You clearly have a vice leader's medallion in your hands. If you want to enter the Tower of Radiance, you can just ask the vice leader to open it for you. Although there will be some objections if other vice leaders want to open it for you, it's only a matter of a single sentence from Vice Leader Xian Zhan with his status in the Radiant Saint Hall. Since you need to enter the Radiant Saint Hall so urgently, why did you take the longer path and find me? You even gave me a precious pure soul. I only obtained Vice Leader Xian Zhan's medallion a few days before entering the world of Moon and Star. Moreover, I don't want to owe Vice Leader Xian Zhan too much. As a result, even if I knew Vice Leader Xian Zhan could directly allow me into the Tower of Radiance, I didn't want to trouble him, as I want to obtain that spot through my own efforts, said Jian Chen. Donglin Yanshue stared at Jian Chen with mixed feelings. She actually said nothing for a moment. Even though Jian Chen's mask had given him an ordinary appearance that would not catch any attention if thrown into a crowd, he had already established a great, sturdy image in Donglin Yanshue's heart when they were in the world of Moon and Star. A person's beauty was not their appearance but their true nature. Only a beautiful true nature would be considered as true beauty. Jian Chen's behavior in the world of Moon and Star seemed to allow Donglin Yanshue to see his true nature, so the image he had established in Donglin Yanshue's heart was handsome. A while later, Donglin Yanshue sighed gently. A hint of disappointment filled her heart as she said, I will be using my right to the Tower of Radiance in half a month's time. I'll send someone to contact you when it's time. Half a month? Jian Chen frowned in response, it's too long. Can you do it sooner? The sooner, the better. It would be best if it's tomorrow. Tomorrow? So soon? Donglin Yanshue was surprised. Yeah. It's so soon due to some reasons. Donglin Yanshue, just treat it as helping me out this time. I will remember this favor, Jian Chen said seriously. Looking at how stern Jian Chen was, Donglin Yanshue actually could not turn him down, so she said, all right then. Tomorrow it is. Just like that, Donglin Yanshue had chosen the day the Tower of Radiance would be opening. As the sun rose up the next day, the clouds and mist near the mountains were dyed a deep red. A group of people with Donglin Yanshue at the lead stood near an ancient tower several hundred meters tall on the highest floor of the Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Chen happened to be among them. There were 8 other Radiant God Kings aside from him. They stood in a row with Jian Chen behind Donglin Yanshue. The 8 Radiant God Kings were Donglin Yanshue's newly chosen protectors. They would be responsible for protecting the chosen saint during the millennia Donglin Yanshue held the position. They would completely follow her and serve her. Jian Chen raised his head slightly and studied the White Tower before him. The White Tower was naturally the Radiant Saint Hall's treasure, the Tower of Radiance. It was completely silver white. It seemed to possess a natural beauty where it was impossible to find any flaws. Although it was a treasure left behind by a Grand Exalt, it gave off no pressure at all. As a result, they even struggled to connect the Tower of Radiance to a Grand Exalt. Don't underestimate this place. As the highest floor in the Sacred Hall, this entire place has been filled with supreme formations. It's said that after the many hardships of the past leaders, they managed to get the Grand Exalt of Ancient Ways to cast down a formation on the level of a Grand Exalt, firmly locking the Tower of Radiance here. It has stopped all experts from eyeing the Tower of Radiance, Donglin Yenshue's voice rang out. Jian Chen nodded gently. He studied every inch of the space there. As expected, an astonishing formation seemed to exist around the Tower of Radiance. The formation was extremely well hidden. If it were not for the changes to Jian Chen's soul after fusing with a strand of chaotic force, he definitely would not have discovered the formation's existence. Donglin Yanshue, have you thought it through? Do you really want to open the Tower of Radiance now? The number of times you can open the Tower of Radiance will only go down once you use it. Elder Mu Zhong appeared silently at this moment, and he stared at Donglin Yanshue with shining eyes. Esteemed Elder Mu Zhong, I've already made my decision. I formally use my special right to the Tower of Radiance, Donglin Yanshue said without any hesitation. Elder Mu Zhong nodded and no longer said anything more. In the next moment, two tremendous, terrifying energies descended from the sky like floods, pouring into the Tower of Radiance with horrifying pressure. The Tower of Radiance immediately lit up. The Grand Exalt's formation that locked up the Tower of Radiance seemed to change slowly, causing the invisible formation to part. It exposed the entrance to the Tower of Radiance. Vice Leader Xian Zhan and Vice Leader Mo He have opened the Tower of Radiance for you. You can go in now, Elder Mu Zhong called out. Chapter 23-24, Ancient Imprints. As Elder Mu Zhong called out, Donglin Yanshue immediately made her way towards the Tower of Radiance. She disappeared into its entrance very soon. After Donglin Yanshue, the 8 newly chosen protectors all showed reverence. They entered in awe and veneration. As Jian Chen was the weakest out of them, he was obviously the last to enter. He only has a one-colored soul core, yet he's so eager to enter the Tower of Radiance. It looks like this kid is impulsive. It'll be difficult for him to become outstanding in the future with his mental state. Elder Mu Zhong stared at Jian Chen as he gradually vanished into the Tower of Radiance. He secretly shook his head. The Tower of Radiance was a gray, hazy world. Visibility was not great. A faint, gray mist permeated the entire space, limiting one's vision to a range of only 100 meters. The ground below was desolate. It was filled with a deathly stillness. Jian Chen frowned slightly as he looked at the miniature world within the Tower of Radiance. He felt like he was suffocating the moment he entered the tower. He actually felt like his own life and death were no longer under his control. Moreover, he could sense slivers of the gray mist deep in his body. He could sense a heavy presence of death from the gray mist. The gray mist is the resentment formed from the lingering regrets of the artifact spirit after it passed away. Once too much of it seeps into your body, it'll cause severe damage. It can even affect the mind. As a result, you can't stay here for too long. Once you feel like you've reached your limit, you have to retreat. Donglin Yanshue looked back at Jian Chen and explained in detail, the injuries won't be anything significant to the Radiant Saint Hall. You can recover from them quickly no matter how severely injured you become. However, once the mist invades the soul and affects the mind, it'll be far too severe, as injuries to the soul are extremely hard to deal with even for our Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Chen nodded to express that he understood. He said, "Where are the cultivation methods and various secret techniques from the seniors hidden? Many ancient imprints drift through this space. Every single ancient imprint was left behind by a past expert of our Radiant Saint Hall. They represent a cultivation method, a radiant arte, or the knowledge on cultivation from our past seniors. However, benefiting from these imprints have nothing to do with strength. It completely depends on personal talent and luck. Donglin Yanxue stared at Jian Chen deeply and explained in detail, close your eyes and open your mind. Call out with your heart. If you are lucky enough, those ancient imprints will come to find you and pass on their contents to you. Jian Chen immediately attempted what Donglin Yanxue told him. He faced the suppression from the lingering regrets of the artifact spirit and the influence from the Tower of Radiance itself, so both the senses of his soul and his regular senses had been reduced to a minimum. They were basically useless now. As a result, he could only try to follow Donglin Yanxue's instructions. Jian Chen was no ordinary person. He had comprehended the laws of the hallowed with a one-colored soul core. That was more than enough to demonstrate his talent. He was far more talented than Donglin Yanxue. As a result, when he opened his mind and called out with his heart, he sensed the existence of 3 ancient imprints very soon. Of course, this was not because of his regular senses. Instead, it was because the 3 ancient imprints had established a mental connection with him willingly. As a result, Jian Chen could sense their existence with precision. Under Jian Chen's senses, the 3 ancient imprints shot through the space there with terrifying speed. They would be in the air sometimes and underground at other times. They all arrived 10,000 kilometers away in a flash. It was like they could teleport. Even when Jian Chen erupted with his full speed, he might not be able to catch up to them. When she saw how Jian Chen had already begun calling for the ancient imprints, determination suddenly flooded Donglin Yanxue's eyes. She waved her hand at the 8 protectors behind her and said to them secretly, "You go first. Don't mind me." "Your Highness, our responsibility." One of the radiant god kings hesitated, but before he could finish talking, Donglin Yanxue cut him off. "Don't worry. I won't be in any danger soon. On the other hand, Changyang only has a one-colored soul core. He can't remain here for long. I'll take him out once he can't last any longer, and then I'll come to find you." The 8 protectors looked at one another. After some slight hesitation, they left together. The Tower of Radiance was also a holy land that hid great fortunes to them. It could even change their fate. It was possible for them to find a great fortune that would basically pave their future path to greatness. They did not want to waste a single moment at all. They were eager to find their own fortuitous encounters. Strange. Why does Her Highness care about Changyang so much? After all, Changyang's identity is technically Her Highness' protector. Instead, Her Highness is watching over him. So much for living for so long. Can't you tell? Her Highness clearly holds feelings towards Changyang. How is that possible? Changyang clearly has a one-colored soul core. Apart from his support from Vice Leader Xian Zhan, he has nothing that stands out. But in the Radiant Saint Hall, there are countless people pursuing Her Highness. All of them are prodigies, and they are on a level that Changyang cannot compare to. Why would Her Highness choose him? I also find it unbelievable. According to my understanding of Her Highness, she was not like this in the past. However, she seemed to have become a completely different person ever since she returned from the world of Moon and Star. The protectors traveled away. Donglin Yanxue stared straight at Jian Chen's ordinary face. She seemed to be thinking of everything she had gone through in the world of Moon and Star with Jian Chen again, and her gaze gradually became gentle. 3 black-robed elders from the disciplinary hall sat within a majestic hall. They were all stern. The initial investigations of the world of Moon and Star have been completed. What I don't understand is how Changyang and Donglin Yanxue managed to survive after encountering Qing Shan. It's rather unbelievable. I had a look at the place as well. Although there are signs of battle involving vicious beasts, it's nowhere near enough for Changyang and Donglin Yanxue to escape from Qing Shan. It's just that Vice Leader Xian Zhan stands with Changyang. All the traces that lead to Changyang are difficult for us to handle. We can't use some special methods at all, since it'll be our loss if we offend Vice Leader Xian Zhan. The 3 elders sighed as they seemed troubled. A while later, one of the elders stood up and made up his mind, I'll go see the vice leader and report what we found from our investigations. Chapter 23-25, The Heaven-Splitting Clan. Dressed in his clean, white robes, Vice Leader Xian Zhan stood in his residence within the sacred hall with his hands behind his back. He gave off a heavy pressure. Before him was a black-robed elder who had condensed a soul tree. He reported the situation. He was one of the important members of the disciplinary hall. Are you saying that Chang Yang hides an unknown secret? Or that there's something off with him? A gleam of light immediately shone through the vice leader's eyes after he heard the elder's report. I dare not jump to conclusions. I just feel like it doesn't really make sense for Chang Yang and the chosen saint to escape from Qing Shan successfully because they did encounter Qing Shan. Even though a powerful vicious beast had burst out and kept Qing Shan busy, Qing Shan has the strength to hunt down Chang Yang and the chosen saint again after he kills the vicious beast. Even radiant god kings were unable to avoid being hunted down, let alone Chang Yang and the chosen saint who aren't even as fast as radiant god kings. As a result, it should have never been possible for Chang Yang and the chosen saint to escape from Qing Shan unless Qing Shan let them off purposefully. Although there's another 3 radiant god kings who survived as well, they did not encounter Qing Shan. You can explain it as they hid so well that even Qing Shan was unable to find them. Their situation is completely different from Chang Yang and the chosen saints. The elder of the disciplinary hall reported all the information he possessed as well as their conjecture to Vice Leader Xian Zhan. Afterwards, he glanced at Vice Leader Xian Zhan's expression carefully and continued, aside from this, I also have a feeling that, the elder paused as if he was worried and had no idea whether he should voice his thoughts or not. Speak, the vice leader commanded without any particular feeling. The elder said gently after mulling over it, I've carefully studied the location. From my many years of experience, I keep feeling that someone has purposefully made the place like that, it is like they're hiding something. Of course, that's only the feeling I have. There hasn't been any viable evidence. Have you turned back time and peered into the past? Vice Leader Xian Zhan asked. The space in the world of moon and star was rather fragile. It could only endure the presence of infinite primes. Experts such as the 8 vice leaders could not set foot there. As a result, they could only use the elders to learn about the situation. We've asked guest elders to turn back time, but there were several dozen locations where Qing Shan fought in the world of moon and star. He disrupted the space-time there as well as the laws, so he rendered turning back time impossible. There's one more matter. I only just learnt that of all the disciples below God King, Chang Yang is the only one who hasn't gone through the blood test. Even the chosen saint obtained a blood medallion soon after recovering, the elder said carefully. The eyes of the vice leader narrowed. After a moment of thought, he waved his hand and said, You can go. Withhold the information for now unless the leader personally asks about it. Yes, I understand. Then I will be dismissing myself, the elder backed away politely. Xian Zhan held the greatest status among the 8 vice leaders because he had already reached the peak of his cultivation level. No one knew when he would break through and reach the next stage. Now that vice leader Xian Zhan had personally given an order, the elder of the disciplinary hall would never dare to pass this information on to the 7 other vice leaders no matter what. With the elder's departure, only Xian Zhan remained within the large residence, standing there alone with his hands behind his back. With a flip of his hand, he took out the jade bottle that held a droplet of Xian Ming's blood and the jade slip that recorded a message from Xian Ming. He had obtained these things from Jian Chen. As he looked at the 2 items, Xian Zhan's gaze deepened. The 9 Clouds Plain was one of the 49 Great Plains. Although it was nowhere near as renowned as the 7 Sacred Plains, the 9 Clouds Plain ranked towards the front among the 42 other Great Plains and 81 Great Planets. This was because the 9 Clouds Plain was home to an extremely powerful clan, the Heaven-Splitting Clan. The Heaven-Splitting Clan was a peak clan that truly rose up in the past 3 million years, having made their name in the saints' world long ago. All of this was because the heaven-splitting clan possessed a supreme expert only second to Grand Primes. He was the heaven-splitting ancestor, one of the few peak experts in the saints' world. He stood on the same level as the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. They were only a step away from Grand Exalt. At this moment, an aqua divine hall stood quietly within the heaven-splitting clan, giving off a vague pressure. Basically everyone knew about this divine hall in the saints' world, as it had caused an uproar a few years ago in the saints' world. It was the Neptunian divine palace that had claimed the lives of around half of the supreme god kings on the god king's throne. At this moment, the new master of the Neptunian divine palace, Xiao Man, accompanied by Zi Yun, sat with a man who seemed to be in his 30s. The man's appearance was nothing special. However, his eyes were peculiar. They would shine brightly at times as if they could see the heavenly secrets and understand all the mysteries in the world. At other times, his eyes would become extremely profound as if they hid a vast galaxy that was enough to swallow the souls of people as the galaxy revolved. He gave off no presence at all and seemed ordinary apart from his eyes, but Xiao Man and Zi Yun were clearly extremely cautious. They seemed to hold much fear towards the man. Even when they were in the Neptunian divine palace, Xiao Man's territory, they still did not feel safe at all. You can consider my suggestion. Although the Neptunian divine palace is of a high grade and is extremely powerful, it doesn't make you invincible. If you leave here, even more experts will begin eyeing you. It'll be very difficult for you to have peace. Only I can protect you and stop those people from eyeing the Neptunian divine palace, said the man. His voice was extremely gentle, enough to refresh people. With that, the man vanished silently. He has already left the Neptunian divine palace. A short old man appeared before Xiao Man. He powerlessly stared at where the man previously Saturday, artifact spirit, the Neptunian divine palace is a high-quality god artifact. It has unbelievable power. Is there really nothing you can do to that person when you control this power? Xiao Man asked. The short old man shook his head and said bitterly, he's the heaven-splitting ancestor. He stands at the same cultivation level as Old Master. Even if all the power within the Neptunian divine palace is unleashed, it will not be enough to stop the heaven-splitting ancestor. Moreover, you know about what happened earlier as well. When the Neptunian divine palace moved through space and avoided the peak experts, we were still extremely distant from the Nine Clouds plane where the heaven-splitting clan resides. In the end, the heaven-splitting ancestor did not even leave the Nine Clouds plane, yet he managed to transport the Neptunian divine palace from so far away. The Neptunian divine palace is no different from a plaything in the hands of someone like that. Do we really have to give the pernight ore to him? Although what he's giving in exchange is very precious, the pernight ore came from my ancestors after all, Xiao Man was reluctant. The short old man sighed gently and said, actually, the heaven-splitting ancestor has already treated us better than those annoying people who chased us before. After all, if he really wants to take the pernight ore, we can't stop him with his strength. Not only did he avoid doing that, but he even offered a great deal to exchange for it. Of course, the little master has already inherited the Neptunian divine palace and obtained everything that old master left behind. Perhaps the little master is not interested in the items that the heaven-splitting ancestor is offering, but his protection holds a completely different significance. Promised protection from an expert like the heaven-splitting ancestor cannot be purchased no matter how many cultivation resources are offered. That's where the true value lies. Once Little Master obtains the protection of the heaven-splitting ancestor, there will be no need to worry about other people causing disturbances in the future. Xiao Man thought about it silently. Although she had obtained the Neptunian divine palace and become its new master, the last few years had not been easy for her because she was just too weak. Many experts cast their greedy eyes on her. They would find her and act tough but talk soft so that they could control her. As long as they controlled her, it would mean controlling the Neptunian divine palace. Some experts began to take forceful measures when they realized that words would not achieve their desired results. Hence, it had not been peaceful for her recently. She was basically disturbed at all times. It was just like what the heaven-splitting ancestor had said. Although the Neptunian divine palace was a high-quality god artifact, it was not invincible. Once all of its energy was depleted and the formations became useless, its defenses would be drastically weakened. Before the Neptunian divine palace took a master, none of the countless experts in the saints' world dared to covet it due to something the blood-tier Grand Exalt had said. However, now that the Neptunian divine palace had a master, an opportunity where the peak experts could obtain the Neptunian divine palace without infringing on the blood-tier Grand Exalt's will had appeared. This was because the blood-tier Grand Exalt only forbid people from fighting over the Neptunian divine palace. He never said they could not rope in the master. As a result, in the eyes of many peak experts, as long as they roped in Xiao Man, they would be able to obtain the Neptunian divine palace. This roping in was naturally referring to controlling. Xiao Man, we're here today because of Jian Chen's assistance. However, countless experts have trapped Jian Chen on the desolate plain for the sake of the Inata Tower. We have to find a way to help him. At this moment, Ziyun spoke up from beside Xiao Man. She struggled to be at peace whenever she thought of the situation that Jian Chen currently faced. Xiao Man's eyes immediately lit up. She said firmly, Sister Ziyun is right. If it weren't for Brother Jian Chen's help, let alone taking back my ancestors' belongings, I probably would have died in the Neptunian divine palace long ago. Now that Brother Jian Chen is in trouble, I have to find a way to help him. I've made up my mind. I can give all the pernight ore on the 8th floor to Senior Heaven-Splitting Ancestor, but the Senior must protect Brother Jian Chen. At the same time, the man who had appeared in the Neptunian Divine Palace hovered where the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor cultivated. He held a black, thumb-sized bead. This man of ordinary appearance happened to be the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor who was renowned in the saints' world. The Heaven-Splitting Ancestor looked at the black bead in his hand, and undisguised desire and excitement filled his eyes. It was truly very difficult to believe that items that interested him so much would exist with his almost perfect cultivation. I never thought that such a shocking secret would be hidden within a bead formed from a fragment of the Grand Exalt of Ancient Path's soul. This terrifying thing that doesn't belong to this aeon has such frightening power. Once it's forged, even Grand Exalts will fear it. The pernight ore in the Neptunian Divine Palace had actually been placed there to nurture by the experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia under the Grand Exalt of Ancient Path's suggestion. Since I've learnt that this pernight ore is crucial to forging that item from the Grand Exalt of Ancient Path's blurry memories, I have to obtain the pernight ore again. Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths, since you weren't able to forge that item, and I happened upon a bead that's formed from a fragment of your soul and learnt the secret about the item, let me complete what you did not, the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor murmured. He rubbed the bead fondly as he treated it like a treasure. At this moment, the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor's face changed. He said, the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace has agreed to exchange the pernight ore with me. Fantastic. Protecting a kid called Jian Chen is a small master. Tu San. I await your orders, Ancestor. An old man stood politely outside the secret room. He was the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor's most loyal servant. Go to the desolate plain and bring me that person called Jian Chen, ordered the Heaven-Splitting Ancestor. Does the Ancestor desire the Inata Tower? The servant was surprised. The Inata Tower? The Heaven-Splitting Ancestor showed some disdain and said, if it were in perfect condition, I would be rather interested, but it's damaged now, and there are seals from the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. Repairing it will cost too much. It's not worth it to go up against EXIN for a damaged Inata Tower. You only need to bring me Jian Chen. You can leave the Inata Tower to the brats on the desolate plain to fight over for. Yes, this one understands. On the Godnigma plain of the 7 sacred plains, the armor-wearing Tai Ta walked out of a secret room. He shone with dazzling, golden light within the majestic war god hall. The presence he radiated with was so powerful that it had reached the primordial realm. Tai Ta had already become an infinite prime. Congratulations on the war god's emergence. 3 old people appeared silently and bowed towards Tai Ta. These 3 old people were the 3 great elders of the god clan. Their authority was so great that they basically only stood second to the war god in the god clan. Is there news of Jian Chen? Tai Ta glanced past the 3 great elders and asked in a dignified sense like he was someone of importance. Your Majesty, Jian Chen possesses the Inata Tower, which has led to the coveting of many experts. Many organizations want to take the Inata Tower from Jian Chen then hand it up to the heavenly palace of Bishan so that they can benefit from it. Jian Chen has already been trapped on the desolate plain now. However, his hiding method is extraordinary. As a result, the experts still haven't found a single trace of him after 3 or 4 years of searching, said a great elder. Although Jian Chen was someone insignificant, the matters that happened on the desolate plain recently were just too shocking. It had already spread across the saints' world such that many peak experts became familiar with Jian Chen's name. It said that the peak experts gathered on the desolate plain have already begun holding blood tests for those below God King, while the peak experts will look into everyone at God King and Infinite Prime personally. They want to find Jian Chen like this, a second elder added. This kid is rather special. I also tried some forecasting in an attempt to peer into his fate, but in the end, I was actually unable to peer into anything that involved him. If the search continues like this, Jian Chen will be found sooner or later even if he's rather special, the 3rd elder spoke as well. Tai Ta snorted coldly as his gaze became piercing. He said seriously, Jian Chen is my close brother. I will never allow anyone to do anything to him. Immediately send experts to the desolate plain to warn all those involved that as long as they harm my brother, they will become my enemy, regardless of who they are. Yes, Your Majesty. We will immediately send a hall elder to the desolate plain personally. The 3 great elders who basically stood supreme in the God clan did not dare to disobey Tai Ta. They followed his orders without any hesitation. This was because the war god was the supreme existence in the God clan. Regardless of his strength, his words would be a divine edict. It truly could not be disobeyed. As a result, even though Tai Ta was only an infinite prime right now, making him an ant-like existence compared to the 3 great elders, he could directly order them. Jian Chen stood with his eyes closed as he called out with his heart in the Tower of Radiance. He rapidly deepened his connection with the 3 ancient imprints. The 3 ancient imprints moved through the Tower of Radiance like fish in water. It was impossible to catch up to them, so the only method of obtaining them was to gain their recognition and have them approach you. In the end, under Jian Chen's efforts, one of the ancient imprints changed directions and directly headed towards Jian Chen. After a few flashes, a fist-sized ball of light appeared between Jian Chen's eyes. Ancient strands of thoughts poured out. Everything recorded within the ancient imprint had been passed on to Jian Chen. Sword transformation technique. With a thought, Jian Chen immediately understood that the ancient imprint actually recorded a radiant arte, but only hallowed saint masters could grasp it. Jian Chen could not help but become submerged in comprehending the radiant arte. At the same time, the laws of the hallowed descended and revolved around him. As he comprehended the radiant arte, the power of the laws of the hallowed pulsed according to a special pattern around him. They seemed to condense into a sword. Donglin Yanxue stood beside Jian Chen to look over him. When the laws of the hallowed descended, her eyes immediately widened. Astonishment filled her face as she fell into emotional turmoil. The laws of the hallowed. It's the laws of the hallowed. He has actually comprehended the laws of the hallowed with a one-colored soul core. How is this possible? Donglin Yanxue cried out inside. In that moment, she could not believe her eyes. She could not believe that this was reality. Most star geniuses in the Radiant Saint Hall would comprehend the laws of the hallowed with a four-colored soul core. Only 5-star geniuses or above could comprehend the laws of the hallowed with a 3-colored soul core and become a hallowed saint master. Even a talented 9-star genius like her and the 4 other candidates for chosen saint had all comprehended the laws of the hallowed with a 2-colored soul core. However, Chang Yang had actually become a hallowed saint master with a 1-colored soul core. It was not like hallowed saint masters with 1-colored soul cores had never appeared. However, the last one to accomplish this feat appeared 1,000,000 years ago. This was more than enough to demonstrate the rarity of hallowed saint masters with 1-colored soul cores. Chang Yang is actually already a hallowed saint master, and from the looks of things, he comprehended the laws of the hallowed quite some time ago. He can be directly elevated to the status of chosen saint from this feat alone. There would be no need for the trials and challenges at all, but why didn't he do that and let me become the chosen saint instead? Donglin Yenshue's mind was a mess. She was stupefied. She deeply understood just how great the status a hallowed saint master with a 1-colored soul core would possess in the Radiant Saint Hall, as that represented a supreme genius that had not appeared for the Radiant Saint Hall in the past 1,000,000 years. At this moment, the ancient imprint flickered and vanished. Afterwards, the laws of the hallowed around Jian Chen vanished. He opened his eyes slowly and immediately saw Donglin Yanxue staring at him in shock. Jian Chen was immediately surprised by this. But afterwards, he suddenly realized that he had accidentally used the laws of the hallowed when he accepted the radiant arte from the ancient imprint. He did not make that happen. It was a completely instinctive action, so it was impossible for him to hide it. However, only his talent as a radiant saint master had been exposed. This was not necessarily a bad thing for him. Moreover, he already planned to leave the Radiant Saint Hall after emerging from the Tower of Radiance. Hence, even if he exposed his talent, the important members of the Radiant Saint Hall would not have enough time to look into his background in detail. Why, you actually became a hallowed saint master a long time ago. Why have you been hiding it the whole time? Did you know that if the upper echelon of the Sacred Hall learnt about your talent, you would be directly elevated to chosen saint? Donglin Yanxue stared at Jian Chen with mixed feelings. I have no interest in the position of chosen saint because I have no plans on staying in the Radiant Saint Hall for much longer. Jian Chen suddenly became stern and said, Donglin Yanxue, I hope you can keep this a secret. I don't want too many people knowing that I've already become a hallowed saint master. Why, you're going to be leaving the Radiant Saint Hall? Donglin Yanxue looked at Jian Chen blankly. For some reason, she became flustered when she heard that Jian Chen would be leaving. Jian Chen did not answer her. He closed his eyes and sensed what he had received and said, I just obtained a radiant arte called the sword transformation technique from the ancient imprint. However, it's not of a particularly high grade. Once I surpass God King, the radiant arte will become completely useless. Do you have any method for me to obtain cultivation methods and radiant arts of higher grade? Donglin Yanxue sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed down her palpitating heart. She said slowly, the ancient imprints floating here have all been prepared for disciples below God King because the contents of the imprints just happen to suit disciples of such a level. However, there's a sacred pavilion within the depths of the Tower of Radiance. The sacred pavilion is the true spirit of our Radiant Saint Hall, it is the place where all the legacies reside. That's because all the cultivation methods, radiant arts, and so on have been left behind by past experts who have condensed soul trees. There's even a legend that the sovereign of the world who stood on par with Grand Exalts, the person who created this Tower of Radiance, had left his cultivation method in the sacred pavilion as well. Of course, no one has been able to obtain this cultivation method throughout the history of our Radiant Saint Hall, including all the leaders. As a result, the Tower of Radiance possessing a Grand Exalt's cultivation method has always remained as a legend. No one can prove that it truly exists, a Grand Exalt's cultivation method. Jian Chen's eyes lit up with undisguised desire. Clearly, he was unable to resist the temptation of the Grand Exalt's cultivation method either. After all, this was not a cultivation method for fighters. If it were a cultivation method for fighters, he would not become interested at all even if it were more powerful than the cultivation methods of Grand Exalts. This was because he cultivated chaotic force. He had embarked on a completely different path of cultivation. It had already taken shape such that it was impossible for him to switch to other cultivation methods. However, Radiant Saint Force was different. The exact thing he lacked right now was a cultivation method for it. As a matter of fact, it was because of this that he had gone to such great lengths to enter the Tower of Radiance. "Let's go to the Sacred Pavilion," Jian Chen said. The Sacred Pavilion was where he truly wanted to go. Donglin Yanxue looked at him in worry and tried to persuade him, "The Sacred Pavilion is in the depths of the Radiant Saint Hall. It'll take some time to reach that place. Although you're already a hallowed Saint Master, you only have a one-colored soul core after all. Under the corrosion of the mist, you won't be able to last for very long. Chang Yang, although the things recorded in the ancient imprints out here are not of particularly high quality, it's enough for you with your current strength. If you want to go to the Sacred Hall, I'll come with you once you raise your strength some more. I have a total of 3 chances to enter the Tower of Radiance during this 1,000-year period. I can leave the remaining 2 chances up to you." Donglin Yanxue spoke very softly. There was a deeply hidden tenderness in her gaze. After she learned that Jian Chen was a deviant that appeared once every 1,000,000 years, his status in her heart was no longer the same as before. "You don't need to worry about me. I'm not as frail as you imagine me to be." "Let's go," said Jian Chen. He did not take the mist here seriously at all. Donglin Yanxue felt helpless. She could only lead the way, taking Jian Chen to the Sacred Pavilion that resided in the depths of the Tower of Radiance. "Is this the Sacred Pavilion?" 3 days later, Jian Chen stood outside a small building completely built out of white rock and asked Donglin Yanxue. Donglin Yanxue stared at the small building, and a sliver of rarely seen seriousness appeared on her face. She said, "That's right, this is the Sacred Pavilion. Don't get fooled by its external appearance. Although it seems like nothing special from the outside, basically an ordinary stone hut, it has its own world inside. Even the radiant origin pearls from the world of Moon and Star come from within the Sacred Pavilion. The Sacred Pavilion is the center of the Tower of Radiance, and it is where the spirit of the Tower of Radiance resides," Donglin Yanxue explained to Jian Chen patiently before urging him. The 8 protectors should have entered the Sacred Pavilion. "Let's go in as well. We stand in the mist at all times, so our time here is extremely limited. We can't waste it." Afterwards, Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue entered the Sacred Pavilion together. Jian Chen immediately felt like he had entered a whole new world when he set foot in the Sacred Pavilion. However, the world within the Sacred Pavilion seemed no different from the outside world. It was also enveloped by thick, gray mist. The artifact spirit's resentment was everywhere. Jian Chen's heart jumped slightly. When he entered the Sacred Hall, he could clearly sense a mental pulse from the sword spirits. They actually awoke from their slumber slowly. "We sense the presence of a being similar to us. Master, where is this place?" Ziying's voice rang out inside Jian Chen's head. "This is the Tower of Radiance, so this is the Tower of Radiance." The artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance is the same as us, the artifact spirit of the primeval Divine Hall, and the artifact spirit of the Inata Tower. We all originate from a strand of power from chaos. We're all undying existences. But it seems like the fate of the artifact spirit here was a little too miserable. Not only did he collapse, but even his consciousness had almost been dispersed, Ziying said in amazement. The sword spirits hid within Jian Chen's body and sensed the situation outside. The artifact spirit here has suffered a fate even worse than ours. He's the most miserable out of all the ones we've seen. If he were no undying, he would have dispersed long ago, Qing Suo also said sympathetically. Jian Chen was shocked by that and asked, "Are you saying that the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance isn't truly dead?" "Of course not. Qing Sua and I, along with the artifact spirits of the Inata Tower and the primeval divine hall that Master has seen before, are the same as the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. We're all undying existences. Even grand exalts can't kill us. They can only suppress or seal us, weakening us greatly. It's just that the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance has suffered the most miserable fate we've seen so far. He must have endured the most terrifying attack from a grand exalt in the past, causing him to collapse and his consciousness to begin dispersing. Although it's not truly death, who knows how long he'll take to recover in his current state. And after he recovers, he'll probably lose all of his past memories. He'll develop a new consciousness and become the second artifact spirit," Ziying sighed gently. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Master, before you is a huge fortuitous encounter," Qing Sua suddenly said excitedly. "A huge fortuitous encounter? What fortuitous encounter?" Jian Chen asked curiously. "The artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance has already collapsed, and its consciousness has begun dispersing. However, its power still remains within the Tower of Radiance. Didn't Master obtain a Radiant Saint artifact in the lower world back then? The artifact spirit evolved from a strand of Radiant Saint Force origin energy after a complicated process. From a certain sense, he shares the same origins as the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. As a result, we can make him fuse with the power and remaining consciousness from the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, replacing the artifact spirit with the artifact spirit of the Radiant Saint artifact through a secret substitution such that he becomes the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance," Ziying said excitedly. Chapter 23-29, Substitution Under the Nose of Heaven, 1, What? Get the artifact spirit of the Saint artifact to devour the remaining power of the Tower of Radiance and make it become the new artifact spirit? Can artifact spirits devour and fuse with each other? Jian Chen jumped in fright from Qing Sua's words. This information was just too shocking. It surprised even Jian Chen. After all, this was basically stealing a peak god artifact, and it was robbery within the sacred hall that had the strictest security in the entire Tower of Radiance. Such a matter was completely reckless. But soon afterwards, excitement sprang up in Jian Chen's heart silently. He suddenly realized that if the artifact spirit of the Saint artifact really became the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance as Qing Sua had said, he would basically become the new master of the Tower of Radiance. If that happened, he could control the Tower of Radiance through the artifact spirit. He would be able to take whatever he wanted from the tower. Qing Sua, getting the artifact spirit of the Saint artifact to replace the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance shouldn't be that simple, right? After all, the difference in strength is just too great. They're on two completely different levels. Jian Chen calmed down very soon. He knew that replacing the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance would not be easy. If the replacement could be performed so easily, the Tower of Radiance probably would have fallen into the possession of the past leaders already. That's right. It's indeed very difficult to the point where basically no Grand Prime can achieve anything like this. However, that doesn't mean Ziying and I can't do this. Master, you can't forget that Ziying and I are spirits transformed from single strands of yin and yang qi when chaos split. We possess our unique aspects. We might never be able to grasp the techniques of some Grand Primes, but we also have some techniques that even Grand Exalts who have basically become a part of the ways cannot grasp, said Qing Sua. Ziying thought about something for a while and added, if the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance was only injured, replacing him would have been impossible. However, his situation right now is horrendous. He has collapsed, and his consciousness has almost dispersed. He isn't even self-aware now. He's just a ball of the most basic power. You can basically interpret him as dead. Even if he recovers, he'll develop a completely new consciousness. He won't possess his past memories. You can say that there are extremely strict conditions to replacing spirits of the universe. First, the artifact spirit must end up in a state like the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, and secondly, they must be replaced by something of the same origins. The artifact spirit of Master Saint Artifact evolved from a strand of Radiant Saint Force origin energy through a complicated process. Even though he's at an extremely low level, he just happens to share the same origins as the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, so this condition is fulfilled. Thirdly, the origin of ways left behind by Grand Exalts passing away in cultivation is required. During the replacement process, the origin of ways can create harmony and promote the fusion of the two artifact spirits. Lastly, there needs to be a reversal of yin and yang and a disruption of laws. We need to elude the heavens before finally completing the substitution, but where are we going to find the origin of ways? Jian Chen became pained when he heard them mention the origin of ways. He happened upon the origin of ways from when the ancient Skywolf had passed away in cultivation on a desolate planet. However, he had already absorbed it, leaving not a single strand behind. Master, Qing Suo and I also collected some of the origin of ways from the ancient Skywolf. We have always been holding on to this origin of ways. Originally, we prepared it for Master's breakthrough to a supreme realm of cultivation, but it looks like we can't wait until then. We can only let the artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact benefit from the origin of ways we collected back then. Ziying's voice rang out, although the origin of ways is precious and basically something that can only be found through luck, if the artifact spirit really succeeds, it won't be a waste. We already have the origin of ways. As for the reversal of yin and yang and the disruption of laws needed to complete the secret substitution, leave that up to Ziying and me. However, Ziying and I still haven't recovered our power, so we'll still need Master's help when the time comes. We won't be able to perform it alone. Of course, whether the artifact spirit succeeds in the replacement will be up to its own fortune. If he succeeds, the artifact spirit will undergo an evolution from its very core and reach a whole new level, truly becoming the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. However, if he fails, he will die and truly disperse. Ziying became stern towards the end. Jian Chen pondered about it and said, I'll ask the artifact spirit. Whether we attempt this or not will be up to him. Afterwards, Jian Chen immediately communicated with the artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact, telling him the sword spirit's thoughts. As soon as the artifact spirit heard Jian Chen's suggestion, he agreed excitedly. He did not hesitate at all. For him, becoming the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance was equivalent to a puny cultivator suddenly gaining a body that was basically invincible. This temptation was just too great. Even if just the slightest carelessness would doom him forever, he was unable to suppress his urge to become powerful. Changyang, what are you staring there for? Do you feel uncomfortable? At this moment, Donglin Yenshue's voice rang out from beside Jian Chen. Donglin Yenshue could not help but ask in concern when she saw how Jian Chen stood there blankly. Jian Chen shook his head gently and replied, I'm fine. I just want to walk around and find my own fortune. I'll accompany you, Donglin Yenshue said gently. There's no need. I want to walk around by myself. Jian Chen declined the offer without any hesitation at all. With that, he used the radiant wings to leave, vanishing into the dense mist in the blink of an eye. Donglin Yenshue remained where she was, blankly staring in the direction that Jian Chen had vanished into. She was gloomy, unable to hide her depression. As for Jian Chen, he no longer held back after leaving Donglin Yenshue. He unleashed his full speed and headed towards the depths of the sacred pavilion. He knew that once the sword spirits truly began the process to replace the artifact spirit, there would be a huge disturbance. No one knew what would happen. As a result, he needed to travel far away enough from Donglin Yenshue and the 8 protectors to stop them from coming over and exposing his identity. After all, exposure at such a time would not be as simple as revealing his ability to wield martial soul force. It would be revealing the existence of the sword spirits. As a result, he could not allow anyone to witness the sword spirits performing the substitution. Chapter 23:30, Substitution under the Nose of Heaven. 2. The sacred pavilion of the Tower of Radiance contained an extremely vast miniature world. No one knew just how large it was. Jian Chen moved through the miniature world at full speed, shooting into the distance like lightning. He could basically cross 1,000 kilometers in a single instance. The mist formed from the lingering resentment of the artifact spirit in the space there had no influence on him at all. He could last a very long time in the Tower of Radiance with his chaotic force. Only after a day of traveling did Jian Chen stop. He sat down in an empty place, and with a thought, a streak of golden light shot out from between his eyes, forming a tiny tower. The tiny tower was the Radiant Saint artifact. Ziying, Qing Suo, get ready to begin, Jian Chen secretly called the sword spirits. The figures of the sword spirits immediately appeared, condensing above Jian Chen's head as an illusionary couple. Once we succeed, you will change in a single instance and become the new artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. You will be countless times more powerful than in the past. However, if you fail, you will truly vanish from the world. After all, you are not us. You are not undying. Are you ready? The sword spirits stared at the saint artifact sharply. I'm ready. With risk comes reward. For the sake of this opportunity for me to rise up, I don't mind even if I might become utterly doomed, the artifact spirit of the Radiant Saint artifact said firmly. Good. Now, we will tell you what you need to do to replace the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. It's nowhere near as simple as it seems. We can only push you along. Whether you succeed will depend on your personal luck and fate, Jian Chen was stern. He immediately used a secret technique and generated chaotic flames through igniting his chaotic force to melt the Radiant Saint artifact. Jian Chen's chaotic force had reached major achievement, so the chaotic flames were extremely terrifying. The Radiant Saint artifact was not of a high grade either, so it melted at a visible rate as it stood within the flames. Nothing remained after getting melted. It had directly been vaporized, burnt into nothingness by the chaotic flames. This was because only materials of certain grades could leave behind something if they were burnt by Jian Chen's terrifying chaotic flames. As the Radiant Saint artifact melted bit by bit, the artifact spirit shrieked out miserably as if he were experiencing hellish pain. As the artifact spirit, he was born from the Saint artifact. He could not be separated from the Saint artifact. If the Saint artifact was destroyed, he would disperse. This was because he was only an artifact spirit that had evolved from energy of lower grades in a lower world. He was not undying like the sword spirits, who could continue to exist even when their swords had shattered. Death awaits with failure. Once you've taken this step, you have embarked on a path of no return. This is only the first step, so you must endure it, or you'll disperse, the sword spirits warned gently. At the same time, the origin of ways shot out from their hands and wrapped around the artifact spirit. We will use a strand of the origin of ways to protect your body, this will prevent it from being destroyed. However, the pain is unavoidable. You can only rely on yourself for that. Remember, even when you're protected by the origin of ways, your consciousness will still collapse and be reduced to energy in the surroundings once you cannot endure the pain anymore. The sword spirits warned extremely sternly. Although the secret substitution, the act of replacing the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance with the artifact spirit of the Saint artifact, was performed by them, they could only push the artifact spirit along. Success or failure would still depend on the artifact spirit alone. In just a few seconds, the Radiant Saint artifact had been truly reduced to nothingness under the chaotic flames, and the artifact spirit had become a fist-sized ball of light. This was his body as well as his consciousness. It was equivalent to someone's soul. Originally, he would share the same fate as the Saint Artifact. Once the Saint Artifact was destroyed, he would not be able to survive. This was the order of nature. However, he just happened to be protected by the origin of ways. The origin of ways originated from when Grand Exalts passed away in meditation, and Grand Exalts were existences who were equivalent to the ways. They were existences who could throw the laws into disorder and control the operation of the heavenly ways. As a result, the artifact spirit had basically broken the laws and interfered with the heavenly ways under the protection of the origin of ways. That was why he could survive. Quick, fuse with the base of the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. The base should be present everywhere. You share the same origins as him, so you should be able to sense the existence of the base. You have to complete all of this before our origin of ways is completely depleted, or you'll still end up dispersing. The sword spirits called out as the origin of ways constantly poured out from their hands. The artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact remained silent. He immediately began to fuse with the power of the Tower of Radiance's artifact spirit that he could sense. Originally, the power of the Tower of Radiance's artifact spirit was terrifyingly great. Even just a shred of it could easily wipe him out, truly dispersing him. This was because they were on two completely different levels. The artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact had no right to devour or fuse with it. However, the origin of ways left behind by a Grand Exalt was completely different. As the artifact spirit was wrapped up in it, it was equivalent to creating brand new laws in the world, forcefully changing all of this. It adjusted the artifact spirit's power, giving him the right to absorb the power of the Tower of Radiance's artifact spirit. The artifact spirit began to absorb this power sliver by sliver. Whenever he absorbed a shred of it, the artifact spirit would begin to swell at an unbelievable rate, like he had just eaten something nourishing. His body began to strengthen at an inconceivable rate. The power of the Tower of Radiance's artifact spirit was just too terrifying. Even just a single shred of it was enough for the artifact spirit to become countless times more powerful than before. As the artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact rapidly strengthened, his absorption of the power gradually sped up as well. As the power got rapidly absorbed, the entire world within the Tower of Radiance underwent a drastic change. The mist that permeated the Tower of Radiance was the lingering resentment that possessed the artifact spirit's regret after dispersing. This resentment seemed to possess the slightest trace of intelligence. At this moment, the resentment seemed to sense something. Suddenly, the mist surged violently and began to gather in from all directions. It began to violently assault the artifact spirit protected by the origin of ways with intense fury. Chapter 23:31, Substitution under the Nose of Heaven. 3. Immediately, the rate at which the artifact spirit absorbed the power was drastically affected. He gradually slowed down. Even though he was protected by the origin of ways and was immune to the assault from the mist was the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance's lingering consciousness. Even though this lingering consciousness was no longer self-aware, it would still react instinctively. Under its instinctive reaction, the lingering consciousness began to resist the artifact spirit's devouring and fusion. Moreover, the lingering consciousness even maneuvered a portion of the Tower of Radiance's power, forming various attacks in an attempt to devour the artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact instead. But in the end, no matter how great the power the lingering consciousness maneuvered, no matter how sharp and terrifying the attacks were, they immediately became mellow when they approached the origin of ways. All the sharpness and danger was removed. This was because it was like new laws had been created within the origin of ways. No matter how great the power, once it entered the origin of ways, it needed to operate under these new laws. If the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance was at its peak condition, it could rival the laws created by the origin of ways with its power as a peak god artifact. But now, it was only a lingering consciousness. It was not even a millionth of its peak condition. Naturally, it was unable to do anything to the origin of ways. It had been firmly restrained. Too slow. If you continue like this, you won't be able to take over the Tower of Radiance. If the origin of ways runs out before you've fused with all of the Tower of Radiance's power, it won't be a complete fusion. Without the shell of the Tower of Radiance holding your body, you will only disperse. You need to speed up, the sword spirit called out. Danger basically came with every step on the artifact spirit's path right now. The slightest carelessness would claim his life, making him truly disperse forever. As a result, the two sword spirits were nervous as well. Jian Chen stared at the artifact spirit sternly, he was also anxious. The origin of ways from when a Grand Exalt passed away was getting rapidly depleted. He had no idea how much of the origin of ways the sword spirits had collected, but it definitely would not be enough to last much longer. He wanted to help the artifact spirit, but it had already devolved into a battle between the artifact spirit and the lingering consciousness. Even the sword spirits were unable to help out, let alone him. At the same time, Donglin Yanxue had already met up with the 8 protectors somewhere else in the sacred pavilion. The 8 protectors were all seated on the ground with their eyes closed, clearly calling at the ancient imprints that drifted about here. Donglin Yanxue sat between the 8 protectors, protected by their encirclement. Her snow-white and luxurious attire as chosen saint wrapped around her slender, curvy figure tightly while her beautiful, picturesque face seemed holy. She seemed to possess a sacred beauty. At this moment, Donglin Yanxue and the 8 protectors opened their eyes at the same time and looked around in surprise. The mist that permeated their surroundings, or even the entire region, suddenly began to churn. It formed great, raging rivers, flowing off in the same direction. Moreover, all of them, including Donglin Yanxue, could clearly sense that a soaring fury seemed to appear from the surroundings. It felt like the fury of heaven, the fury of the world, the fury of the universe. It was awe-inspiring and vast, directly striking their souls and affecting their minds. What is going on? What has happened? Why has something that has never happened before occurred? Donglin Yanxue and the 8 protectors all stood up and looked around the surroundings in surprise and doubt. The soaring fury that seemed to originate from their surroundings affected all of their minds. They struggled to remain calm as they felt a strange sense of anger rise up from the bottom of their hearts. It made them agitated and unable to remain calm. It seems like fury from the lingering consciousness of the artifact spirit, one of the protectors said with uncertainty. The fury from the artifact spirit's lingering consciousness? How is that possible? How does the lingering consciousness have thoughts? How does it have feelings? And why is it furious? Another protector asked in confusion. Donglin Yanxue became surprised at this moment. She called out gently, "Have you discovered that the mist here seems to have thinned out? It really has thinned out. Something significant must have happened in the sacred pavilion, let's go. Let's head in the direction where all the mist is surging towards. Let's see what's happening at the other end." The protectors escorted Donglin Yanxue and flew in Jian Chen's direction with lightning speed. At this moment, more and more mist that contained the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance's power gathered at Jian Chen's location. The artifact spirit of the Saint Artifact became more and more powerful as well due to all this power. In particular, when it reached a certain level of strength, the resistance from the lingering consciousness clearly paled in comparison. It seemed powerless. As a result, the artifact spirit was able to fuse with the power with even greater ease. Naturally, he absorbed it faster and faster. Jian Chen gradually stopped worrying when he saw that. He knew that the outcome of the fusion between the artifact spirit and the power was set in stone now. The step had been truly completed now. However, he still did not dare to be careless because the entire process had not truly ended. Several hours later, the artifact spirit finally absorbed all the power of the Tower of Radiance's artifact spirit. The mist there thinned out as a result, but it did not disperse completely. It had just become very thin. After fusing with all the power, the artifact spirit became extremely powerful. At that moment, he seemed like a blinding sun, shining with dazzling light. Even Jian Chen felt like he was suffocating when he stood before him. Of course, the artifact spirit was unable to control the terrifying power he had suddenly obtained. His body trembled in the air, unable to achieve stability. The origin of ways is going to run out soon. Quick, before it's completely depleted, fuse all your power with the Tower of Radiance and refine it so that you truly become a part of the Tower of Radiance, and the Tower of Radiance is your new shell. This is the last step and also the most difficult step to take. If we're successful, you're the new artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, but if you fail, what awaits you is certain doom. You will truly disperse, Ziying called out. Afterwards, he and Ziying drifted away from Jian Chen's head. They arrived at a high altitude as two streams of light, one violet and one azure. They formed a huge diagram of yin and yang, rapidly revolving around each other. Master, we are going to reverse yin and yang and disrupt the laws to elude the heavenly ways so that we can complete the substitution. Otherwise, the artifact spirit will be slain by the heavenly ways. We're not powerful enough to do this alone right now, so we need assistance from Master's power, the sword spirit said. They revolved faster and faster in the air as if they had become the yin and yang qi after chaos split. They became black and white. The final fusion with the Tower of Radiance will be up to him. We can only wait for the final result now, Ziying said feebly. With that, he and Qing Suo turned into two streaks of light and vanished into Jian Chen's body. They fell into a deep slumber. Jian Chen sat on the ground as he looked at the barren world where the mist had mostly dispersed. He felt eager inside. Artifact spirit, you have to succeed. You can't let us down. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. Immediately, he saw through the mist to several tens of thousand kilometers away. Now that the mist in the Tower of Radiance had thinned out drastically, its influence on Jian Chen had been reduced as well. As a result, he could clearly see several tens of thousand kilometers away. He clearly saw the 8 protectors and Donglin Yanxue rapidly make their way over. I need to go somewhere else. Jian Chen stood up and removed all the traces there before leaving silently. Soon after his departure, Donglin Yanxue and the 8 protectors appeared. The source of the disturbance should be here, but that's strange. Everything is normal. There's nothing weird about this place. The 8 protectors paced around nearby and carefully studied it. They were all puzzled. Use the senses of your souls, said Donglin Yanxue. Under the influence of the mist here, we can only expand the senses of our souls for several dozen kilometers, but we've already checked that range. We found nothing, said a protector. The mist here has thinned out for no reason. Something must have happened in the sacred pavilion. We were just late, another protector said. Afterwards, the protectors scoured every inch within a range of 1,000 kilometers under Donglin Yanshue's request. The result was obvious. They found nothing. Jian Chen sat quietly on a hill 10,000 kilometers away from them. Originally, he had entered the sacred pavilion in search of a high-level cultivation method for radiant saint masters, but he was in no mood to look for the ancient imprints drifting through the place now. Currently, the success or failure of the artifact spirit was countless times more important than the cultivation methods to him. Even if a grand exalt's cultivation method was placed before him, it would not make his concerns for the artifact spirit waver. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about the artifact spirit situation, nor was there anything he could do about it. He could only wait there patiently. I think you'll benefit in the end with your talent. Chang Yang only has a one-colored soul core, and his talent is only 1 star. What talent can he have? The protectors behind her all pouted in thought. At this moment, the mist in the area surged once again. It churned like a dragon was swimming through it, causing the space there to distort as the ground rumbled gently. In that moment, the world within the Tower of Radiance seemed to have revived from the dead. It suddenly sprang to life, and the veins of the ground began to awaken. The slumbering power seemed to rouse gradually as well. A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. Suddenly, he stood up and glanced at the surroundings. His eyes gradually lit up. He knew the sudden phenomenon in the Tower of Radiance was related to the artifact spirit. This filled him with endless anticipation. What's happening? What is happening? How is it possible for the world within the Tower of Radiance to tremble? What's happening to the Tower of Radiance? Why have weird things happened one after another? The ancient records have never detailed anything like this. The sudden occurrences made the 8 protectors uneasy. They all became worried. None of them knew what was happening. At this moment, extremely pure radiant saint force suddenly appeared. No one knew where it came from, it seemed like it had appeared out of nowhere. Afterwards, it rapidly permeated the surroundings, enveloping the entire world before gradually filling every inch of the Tower of Radiance. The 8 protectors were startled by this radiant saint force origin energy at first, but they were soon ravished with joy. What pure radiant saint force! It's even denser than the energy within the sacred hall. And there seems to be fragments of laws within them. There really are fragments of the laws of the hallowed within the radiant saint force. Absorbing these fragments is equivalent to directly absorbing the power of the laws of the hallowed. It'll make our comprehension even easier. This is a huge fortune, a huge fortuitous encounter. We can't afford to miss out on it. Everyone, cultivate quickly. Yeah. Cultivate. Quick, cultivate. Don't waste any time at all. The 8 protectors were utterly overjoyed. They immediately sat down and began to cultivate as hard as they could, absorbing as much of the fragments within the radiant saint force as possible. Changyang, what are you staring blankly for? Hurry up and cultivate. Once you miss out on this opportunity, it will never present itself again. Donglin Yanxue called out to Jian Chen before immediately cultivating as well. Jian Chen sensed what was going on silently before closing his eyes slowly and beginning to cultivate as well. At the same time, a white-robed figure enveloped by light sat within a secret room of the Radiant Saint Hall. He gave off a tremendous pressure naturally, causing the entire space in the secret room to seemingly freeze up. Extremely powerful laws of the hallowed revolved around him. His comprehension of the laws had clearly reached an extremely deep level. Every single strand of laws gathered around him possessed devastating power. He was the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, the supreme existence within the Radiant Saint Hall. Suddenly, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall opened his eyes. His gaze was sharp, piercing through the obstructions as he looked in the direction of the Tower of Radiance. He murmured, "The heavenly secrets have revealed themselves in a flash. Something has happened to the Tower of Radiance." With that, he silently vanished. When he appeared again, he was outside the Tower of Radiance pinned down by a grand exalts formation. "Why have you come?" An indifferent voice rang out. Vice Leader Xian Zhan appeared silently as well. "Leader, why have you come personally? Has something happened within the Tower of Radiance?" Another voice rang out. It bore some respect. Vice Leader Mo he appeared there too. The leader stared at the Tower of Radiance firmly as the light in his eyes flickered. He became both surprised and doubtful. "When I was cultivating, I suddenly established a connection with the world and saw a glimpse of the heavenly secrets. Something surprising has probably happened within the Tower of Radiance." "What? Something has happened within the Tower of Radiance?" The faces of both Xian Zhan and Mo he changed. They became stern. "What has happened within the Tower of Radiance?" Xian Zhan asked sternly. The leader shook his head and said solemnly, "The heavenly secrets are obscure. It's impossible to see them clearly. I only saw a haze as well. I couldn't see it clearly, nor can I tell whether it's good or bad. You stay here. I'll go in and investigate just what has happened to the Tower of Radiance. With that, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall took personal action. Through a special method, he opened a gate in the supreme formations around the Tower of Radiance and vanished with a flash. He had entered the Tower of Radiance. Opening the Tower of Radiance required the combined efforts of vice leaders Xian Zhan and Emohi, but the leader could achieve the same feat all by himself without any difficulty. This was a testament to the leader's strength. I never thought the leader would personally enter the Tower of Radiance this time. It looks like what happened in the Tower of Radiance is quite significant, or it wouldn't have alarmed the leader. He watched as the leader vanished and said sternly. The Tower of Radiance is the reason why our Radiant Saint Hall stands where it is today. It is our most valuable treasure. We can't let anything happen to it, Xian Zhan also said sternly. Then he looked at Emohi and said, even the leader can't tell if the happenings in the Tower of Radiance will be good or bad. However, just in case, we have to be ready for the worst-case scenario. Immediately gathered the 6 other vice leaders. Get them to come here just in case something happens. All right. We can't be careless at all since this involves the Tower of Radiance. We should make all the preparations we can. I'll immediately contact the others, he said sternly before leaving immediately. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall currently stood within the barren world of the Tower of Radiance with his hands behind his back as he seemed to stroll about leisurely. He did not take any rapid steps, but he seemed to go from a completely different space to another with each step. He would cross over 1,000,000 kilometers. It was like distance was no longer an obstruction to him. His strength had already reached a terrifying level where he could ignore distance. He could even twist the laws to a certain degree and barely disrupt the operation of the heavenly ways. This was the terrifying strength that a Grand Prime possessed. Grand Primes were existences who stood at the very apex of the saints' world. It was the highest realm for cultivation. Even the 7 Grand Exalts who had shaken up the saints' world belonged to this cultivation level. There were weaker and stronger Grand Primes. Sovereigns of the world who had gained the title of Grand Exalt were terrifying existences who had reached the limits of Grand Prime. They had truly comprehended a single law in all of its entirety, grasping its mysteries completely. As a result, Grand Exalts were existences akin to the heavenly ways. They represented the greatest wills in the world. They were truly supreme. The mist in the Tower of Radiance has actually thinned out by so much, and it's dispersing at an extremely gradual rate. If this continues, all of the mist will vanish from the Tower of Radiance after a few years. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall moved through the Tower of Radiance with terrifying speed, paying close attention to every difference. At the same time, his gaze would shine sharply from time to time, piercing through space and seeing the very depths of the Tower of Radiance. The mist there did not affect him at all. What has happened in the Tower of Radiance? How did this pure radiant saint force appear? And where did the fragments of the laws of the hallowed come from? The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall was puzzled. The ancient books that had existed for who knows how long in the Radiant Saint Hall had no records of similar events. In other words, this was the first time something like this had happened. It was unprecedented. Has the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance awakened? Apart from the artifact spirit, there's nothing else that can make the Tower of Radiance change so much. Even I can't achieve something like this. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall's eyes became extraordinarily bright as soon as he reached this conclusion. Even with his mental fortitude, his emotions began to waver. Let me try peering a little to see if I can observe the truth from the heavenly secrets. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall closed his eyes and fused with the ways. He established a connection with the world, peering into the past and future. However, he opened his eyes again very soon. He shook his head as he sighed gently. The Tower of Radiance was a peak god artifact personally forged by a Grand Exalt after all. Its quality was just far too great. With the leader's current strength, he was unable to peer into any secrets about the Tower of Radiance. With a flash, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall crossed an immeasurable distance and appeared outside a small building. He directly entered the building, arriving in the miniature world of the Sacred Pavilion. Very soon, he arrived at the location where the sword spirits had reversed yin and yang to elude the heavens. He first stared at the place for a while before closing his eyes. He stood there quietly with his hands behind his back as he sensed the surroundings. This seems to be the origins of whatever the Tower of Radiance went through. It's just a pity that a mysterious and great power disturbed the heavenly secrets as if they were purposefully trying to hide the events here. As a result, I can't peer into the past. Was it the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance? The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall pondered. He glanced into the distance indifferently. He was looking at the hill where Donglin Yanxue and the others cultivated. However, he dismissed his thoughts soon afterwards. Even he was unable to tell what exactly had happened within the Tower of Radiance, so he naturally believed these juniors would not know anything either. It was even more impossible for him to become suspicious of them. This was because countless powerful leaders had attempted to revive the artifact spirit throughout history, but none of them had managed to succeed in the end. Since the past leaders could not achieve this, it would be even more impossible for them to achieve it. It looks like it is extremely likely that these events were caused by the artifact spirit. After all, the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths personally said back then that the artifact spirit was not truly dead. He would just recover slowly at a certain time in the future. The past leaders have recorded what the Grand Exalt of Ancient Ways said. It has been passed down from generation. It looks like now is the time when the artifact spirit awakens. The leader reached this initial conclusion. Afterwards, he vanished with a flash. He had left the Tower of Radiance. Leader, what's the situation inside the Tower of Radiance? A vice leader immediately asked nervously as soon as the leader emerged. Apart from Xian Zhan and Mo He, 6 other people had appeared outside the Tower of Radiance. Their presences were extremely powerful. The 6 other vice leaders had arrived as well. Currently, all 8 vice leaders had gathered together. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall cleared up his thoughts and said, it should be the artifact spirit reviving. We can reach a basic conclusion right now that the artifact spirit is responsible for whatever happened in the Tower of Radiance. What? The artifact spirit is awakening? The faces of the 8 vice leaders all lit up. The mist inside is rapidly thinning out. When it full disperses, it will become a safe haven. We can let all our late radiant god kings hide in there. As long as they have the protection of the Tower of Radiance, that mysterious person won't be able to harm the radiant god kings even if he comes again, the leader said sternly as a vicious light flashed through their eyes. The 8 vice leaders all fell silent from that. They thought about the mysterious expert who had forced the Radiant Saint Hall into horrible shape several 100,000 years ago. They all became bitter. The mysterious expert had caused endless humiliation to their Radiant Saint Hall. Not only did he slaughter all of their Radiant God Kings, but he had even killed his way into their sacred hall alone. He had been unstoppable. By himself, he had basically pressed the Radiant Saint Hall to the point of suffocation. Even when the Radiant Saint Hall requested help from the other peak organizations, promising great rewards, none of them would help. This was because the person's strength sent shivers down the spines of all the peak experts on the desolate plain. Many of them believed that no one could stand up to him apart from the Celestial Sword Saint. Something huge is happening in the Tower of Radiance right now. Not only has even purer Radiant Saint Force appeared, but the Radiant Saint Force also contains fragments of the laws of the Hallowed. These fragments will not exist forever, so we have to make good use of them before they disperse. We can't waste them. Immediately pass down the order that we will be opening the Tower of Radiance in advance. Let all disciples with enough merit enter the Tower of Radiance to cultivate, the leader continued, giving an order firmly. But leader, "We've opened the Tower of Radiance for the chosen saint this time," said Mohi. "Let the chosen saint keep her opportunity of opening the Tower of Radiance. Immediately get all the elders to gather their disciples and send them in as soon as possible. Do not waste too much time. Moreover, these fragments won't be able to benefit the elders with soul trees much at all, so limit the people who can enter to those below the elder level." After receiving the leader's orders, the 8 vice leaders immediately got to work. They passed on the message to the elders below, telling them to get ready. Whatever happened in the Tower of Radiance this time held extremely great significance to the Radiant Saint Hall. As a result, they opened the Tower of Radiance in advance and also lowered the requirements drastically, allowing many people to enter. As soon as the news broke out, it immediately led to an uproar in the Radiant Saint Hall. All the disciples signed up eagerly. In just a single day, over 100,000 people signed up. Basically all of them were Radiant Saint Masters who had comprehended the laws of the Hallowed. On one end were the Radiant God Kings, people who stood as Lords of Peaks, and on the other end were Hallowed Saint Masters with only 4 colored soul cores. Of course, there were even more people who had no right to enter. Over 100,000 disciples was only around 1/10 of the total amount of disciples in the Radiant Saint Hall, which had more than 1,000,000 disciples. All the disciples who signed up gathered outside the Tower of Radiance in a tightly packed but neat line. They were led by the several thousand Radiant God Kings. When the Tower of Radiance was opened up, they all turned into streaks of light and shot in. Heavens, what dense Radiant Saint force! The Sacred Hall has always been a holy land for cultivation in our hearts, but the energy within the Tower of Radiance right now is far, far more abundant in comparison. Most importantly, the Radiant Saint force contains fragments of the laws of the Hallowed. This is a huge fortuitous encounter that can only be happened upon. Cultivating in here for a year is probably equivalent to several hundred years or even over a millennium of cultivation outside, and this is just the outer layer of the Tower of Radiance. It's already so dense here. Wouldn't it be even more terrifying the further we venture in? As soon as they stepped into the Tower of Radiance, the Radiant God Kings could not help but sigh in amazement. Their eyes lit up as they became extremely excited. They all flew towards the sacred pavilion. As Radiant God Kings, they had all cultivated for many years. This was not the first time they had entered the Tower of Radiance, so they were familiar with its interior. They basically knew where to go. At the same time, Jian Chen sat with Donglin Yanxue and everyone else within the sacred pavilion, focusing on cultivation on the hill. They rapidly absorbed the energy that permeated the surroundings along with the fragments of the laws of the Hallowed. At this moment, the Radiant Saint force around Jian Chen surged. The Radiant Saint force that had condensed around him immediately strengthened drastically while the soul core in his head revolved rapidly and gradually gained a second color. With the appearance of this second color, Jian Chen was formally a Radiant Saint Master with a 2-colored soul core. I still ended up breaking through. I can't keep it suppressed. Jian Chen was not happy at all after he broke through. Instead, he sighed inside. He had used 4 years to go from a 1-colored soul core to a 2-colored soul core. It was indeed a little too fast compared to other Radiant Saint Masters who needed centuries for the same breakthrough. In reality, he never properly tried to cultivate during those 4 years. Instead, he spent most of his time comprehending the laws of the Hallowed. He could have broken through long ago if he wanted to. But since he wanted to absorb the fragments of the laws of the Hallowed, he could not avoid absorbing the Radiant Saint force as well. As a result, he could no longer keep his breakthrough suppressed, condensing a 2-colored soul core uncontrollably. At this moment, Jian Chen seemed to sense something. He suddenly looked into the distance. He could see through the thin mist to several tens of thousand kilometers away. He immediately frowned. Why have so many Radiant God Kings suddenly appeared? Jian Chen thought. He could clearly see over 30 Radiant God Kings making their way over several tens of thousand kilometers away. It looks like what happened in here has alarmed the upper echelon of the Radiant Saint Hall. The light in Jian Chen's eyes flickered. He closed his eyes without revealing any of his thoughts on his face at all, acting like it was nothing as he continued cultivating. Oh no, people are coming. The 8 protectors around Donglin Yanxue all sensed the group when they were 1,000 kilometers from the hill. They all called out and stopped cultivating. The mist within the Tower of Radiance was rapidly thinning out, so its impact on the senses of the Radiant God King's souls had decreased as well. Their senses could reach 1,000 kilometers away now. Very soon, the group of Radiant God Kings gradually appeared on the horizon. A small portion of the group was female. They varied in age, but they all possessed great beauty and refined bearings. The woman at the front seemed like she neared middle age, but she still possessed charm. Time did not leave a single trace on her face. The Radiant God Kings behind all seemed to be following her. Auntie. Donglin Yanxue immediately stood up in surprise when she saw the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman at the very front was the Lord of the Myriad Flowers Peak, Donglin Qiushui. Auntie, why have you come? Donglin Yanxue immediately went up to receive her, asking in surprise. Logically speaking, no one else apart from her and her 9 retainers could enter the Tower of Radiance at this time. Despite that being the case, so many Radiant God Kings had suddenly appeared now. It's not just us this time. There are even more people who've entered the Tower of Radiance. Basically all 99 lords of the main peaks have come, said Donglin Qiushui. She glanced past Donglin Yanxue's protectors before pausing on Jian Chen slightly. She continued to say, everyone knows that something has happened to the Tower of Radiance. You've been in here the entire time, so did you find out just what has happened? We might have been in the Tower of Radiance the entire time, but even we don't know what has happened in here, Donglin Yanxue said cluelessly. Donglin Qiushui was not surprised by this at all. Although she did think about getting lucky and learning something useful from Donglin Yanxue, she also understood that it was probably very difficult for Donglin Yanxue and the others to learn anything useful given their strength. From what we know right now, the situation with the Tower of Radiance is taking a good turn. Once the mist here completely disperses, all the Mid-God King Peak Lords within our Radiant Saint Hall can break through here and get through the cultivation level of Late God King safely. They can stay here until they condense a soul tree and reach the other cultivation realm. Donglin Qiushui stared at the mist deeply as undisguised eagerness and desire appeared in the depths of her eyes. It was not only her. Even the Radiant God Kings behind her and Donglin Yanxue's 8 protectors showed something similar. Many of them had reached Mid-God King in terms of cultivation, and they had remained at that level for many years. Donglin Qiushui, in particular, had reached the boundary of that level. She could have broken through to Late God King many years ago. However, none of them dared to break through because basically not a single late Radiant God King had managed to survive in the past several 100,000 years. All of them met their ends at the hands of an unbelievably powerful mysterious expert. For that exact reason, not a single late God King expert had appeared within the Radiant Saint Hall since then. All of them suppressed their cultivation, remaining at Mid-God King. They did not dare to advance to the next level. Yanxue, take advantage of this opportunity and cultivate well. Try to condense a 7-colored soul core as soon as possible and become a God King, Donglin Qiushui said to Donglin Yanxue. Yes, Auntie. And you, Changyang. You're the weakest, so you need to work even harder. Alright, let's not waste any more time. Let's cultivate individually first and condense the laws of the hallowed, Donglin Qiushui said to everyone before making her way onto the hill and sitting down. The Radiant God Kings behind her all sat down with her, crossing their legs and closing eyes. Some of them had already reached the peak of Mid-God King, but there were also others who had yet to reach the limits of the cultivation level despite being Mid-God Kings. As a result, they still had room for improvement. Radiant God Kings like Donglin Qiushui who had reached the limit no longer absorbed any of the Radiant Saint force in the surroundings. They only comprehended the fragments of the laws of the hallowed there to set up for their future breakthroughs. In the blink of an eye, a month passed by. During this month, Jian Chen had reached the peak of the two-colored soul core. He was only a step away from condensing a three-colored soul core. Of course, it would have been impossible for his strength to increase so rapidly under ordinary circumstances. This was all because of the extremely pure radiant saint force in the Tower of Radiance. In reality, it was not just Jian Chen who had made drastic improvements during this month. It was the same with the others. Many radiant god kings had gone from the early stage to the mid-stage during this month. Donglin Yanxue had successfully condensed a five-colored soul core as well, becoming an existence equivalent to a god. The radiant saint force has begun to decrease. At this moment, Jian Chen opened his eyes slowly. He was in no hurry to break through. Instead, he raised his head to look at the sky. Now, he had gained a vague understanding of something. The radiant saint force that had suddenly appeared was not endless. Has it already begun to decrease? Donglin Qiushue, who sat nearby, stopped cultivating as well 3 days later. She stood up and said to the people behind her, "It looks like the radiant saint force here is about to be depleted. Let's go check out other places." With that, the radiant god kings all stood up. None of them had submerged themselves in cultivation, so they immediately roused when Donglin Qiushue spoke to them. Afterwards, Donglin Qiushue's group left the hill. In the following period of time, the radiant saint force within the Tower of Radiance would basically decrease by an extremely evident amount every single day. The fragments of the laws of the hallowed would weaken as well. Many radiant god kings had left where they had been cultivating, moving about in the sacred pavilion in search of a place where radiant saint force was still abundant so that they could keep cultivating. There were also other radiant god kings who gave up on cultivating altogether. They meditated as they called for the ancient imprints in an attempt to inherit what they possessed. Donglin Yanshue's 8 protectors all stopped cultivating as well. They began to call for the ancient imprints. The radiant saint force in the Tower of Radiance had already dropped to a point slightly below the abundance in the sacred hall. The fragments of the laws of the hallowed would no longer bring any benefits to radiant god kings either, so there really was no point in them continuing to cultivate. However, Donglin Yanxue continued to cultivate. She was nowhere close to being a radiant god king, so the decrease in energy did not affect her too much. "Master," at this moment, a voice that Jian Chen had been waiting for the entire time rang out in his head. It seemed to rise up from the bottom of his soul. "Artifact Spirit." Jian Chen lit up when he heard the sudden voice. He sensed his surroundings in an attempt to find the artifact spirit, but he found no trace of him. "Artifact Spirit, have you succeeded?" Jian Chen asked inside. He knew the artifact spirit could sense his thoughts. "Master, I haven't succeeded completely yet. I've only gained a rudimentary control over the Tower of Radiance. There's still a long path ahead of me before I gain full control. The Tower of Radiance is more difficult to take over than we imagined. But Master, I've already fused with some memory fragments of the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. I learnt where the past master of the Tower of Radiance left his legacy imprint from these fragments." Jian Chen was overjoyed by this news. The past master of the Tower of Radiance was a great, terrifying existence. His legacy would definitely be at the level of Grand Exalts. It would be one of the greatest legacies in the world. Did he not enter the Tower of Radiance exactly for a powerful cultivation technique? "Where's the legacy?" Jian Chen immediately asked. "It's in another independent miniature world. Only the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance can open its gateway," said the artifact spirit. "Really? No wonder there has always been a rumor that the Tower of Radiance holds a Grand Exalt's cultivation method, but no one has truly seen it. It looks like it has been stored in another miniature world, one that can only be opened by the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance." Jian Chen came to a realization. "Master, go somewhere quiet. "I'll open the gateway for you," said the artifact spirit. Alright, Jian Chen was overjoyed. A grand exalts cultivation method and one that specialized in radiant saint force was basically a temptation he could not resist. Immediately, Jian Chen left the hill alone. He condensed a pair of radiant wings and flew towards a region devoid of people. The 8 protectors opened their eyes slightly. They watched Jian Chen leave, but they did not stop him. The 8 of them were Donglin Yenshue's retainers. Protecting Donglin Yenshue was their responsibility, so the 8 of them could not leave like Jian Chen before they obtained Donglin Yenshue's permission. Jian Chen flew through the world within the sacred pavilion quickly. He no longer concealed his strength, erupting with his full speed. He could cross 1,000 kilometers in a single instance, and he soon arrived in an empty region. Along the way, he encountered many radiant god kings. He could detect their position in advance and avoid them easily. He could now sense things within a range of several tens of thousand kilometers, while the radiant god kings were only at the peak of mid-god king at most. Under the influence of the mist, they could only sense several thousand kilometers away. As a result, Jian Chen was not detected by anyone along the way. Before long, Jian Chen finally arrived in a location that rarely saw any people. It was a barren mountain range. The radiant saint force in the area was thin, so very few people set foot here. Jian Chen stopped in a valley within the depths of the mountain range. The mountains around him stood like a basin. Hence, even if there were some disturbances from the opening of the miniature world, he could use his surroundings to cover it slightly. Artifact Spirit, open up the miniature world here, Jian Chen secretly called out to the artifact spirit. He was no longer able to sense the artifact spirit's existence, but since the artifact spirit had gained a rudimentary control over the Tower of Radiance, he was equivalent to the world here. It would sense everything that happened within the Tower of Radiance. As expected, the space in the valley began to pulse violently. As if a great, invisible power had suddenly descended, the space there twisted. In that instance, the barren mountain range where Jian Chen stood became enveloped by the great power of space. The space there constantly shook as the landscape twisted. It was all reduced to a blur. Jian Chen secretly frowned at this sight. He stared at the distorting space that spread over towards him, and with a single movement, he appeared 1,000 meters away like he had teleported. However, a huge boulder which stood where he was before became enveloped by the twisted space. It crumbled into pieces silently. Why have you created such a great disturbance? Jian Chen's heart sank slightly. The disturbance was just too great. If this continued, radiant god kings would be drawn over before long. Master, the gateway to the miniature world is just too difficult to open. I've only just gained a basic grasp over the Tower of Radiance, so I can only use a tiny portion of its power. I still need some time. At the same time, the strained voice of the artifact spirit rang out in Jian Chen's head. Clearly, the difficulty of opening the miniature world was far greater than the artifact spirit had expected. With his current ability, it was clearly extremely strenuous for him to open up the miniature world. After all, the memories he had inherited were incomplete. They were only a few fragments, so he obviously had no idea how much power he needed to open up this gate. Gradually, the disturbance grew greater and greater. The pulses of energy and power of space spread beyond the range of the mountain uncontrollably. Several tens of thousand kilometers away, there happened to be a few radiant god kings traveling together. They conversed and laughed along the way. At this moment, their faces changed. They suddenly looked in the direction of the mountain range and cried out. What great powers of space! What's happening there? This energy really is powerful. Let's go and have a look. As a result, these radiant god kings hurried towards the mountains. Strange. Why would space pulse within the Tower of Radiance? It's impossible for any of us to grasp the laws of space. Is the Tower of Radiance undergoing something unrecorded in the books again? ignore the ancient imprints. The space inside the Tower of Radiance has suddenly become abnormal. Something else is going to happen here again. Let's go and quickly have a look. During the first time, dense radiant saint force and the fragments of the laws of the hallowed suddenly appeared. Now that it's the second time, a great fortuitous encounter must be involved. As time went on, more and more radiant god kings sensed the disturbances from the mountains. Immediately, they all stopped what they were doing and hurried over with lightning speed. The entire valley was filled with distorted space, causing the space there to become extremely chaotic. Jian Chen had already left the valley. He stood in an inconspicuous location 10 kilometers away, paying close attention to the disturbances in the valley. He would glance around the surroundings of the valley indifferently from time to time. Radiant God Kings arrived in the surroundings of the valley group after group. These people all gathered around the valley, maintaining a certain distance as they stared at the distorted space and discussed. It's my miscalculation this time. I never thought it would be this difficult to open up the miniature world, Jian Chen thought. The gathering of the Radiant God Kings basically made it impossible for him to receive the Grand Exalt's legacy silently. It looks like a spatial gate is about to open up in the valley. To another side, Donglin Qiushui stood on a mountain with over 30 Radiant God Kings behind her. It is indeed the sign of a spatial gate opening. However, this spatial gate is clearly extremely stable, making it extremely difficult to open. That's why this has happened. There's actually another space hidden within the sacred pavilion. This has never been recorded in the history of our Radiant Saint Hall. A middle-aged man stood with his hands behind his back to another direction. Over 20 Radiant God Kings stood behind him. This middle-aged man was the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak, the same person who had bestowed the 1,000-leaf lotus upon Jian Chen in the past. Radiant God Kings constantly hurried over to the mountains, so more and more Radiant God Kings gathered there. They reached over 1,000 in number. They stood in a fan-like shape, surrounding the valley as they paid close attention. Moreover, there were quite a few Radiant Saint Masters with 5 or 6 colored soul cores as well. Jian Chen did not stand out at all among them. He even failed to garner much attention. Chapter 2338, The last 5. Jian Chen stood 10 kilometers away and watched all of this coldly. Determination flooded his eyes. This time, the Grand Exalt's cultivation method would be his. No one could stop him, not even the elders who had reached the primordial realm. The difficulty in opening the miniature world was far greater than the artifact spirit had expected. The space at the bottom of the valley twisted for an entire day, and it still did not open completely. Only a fist-sized tunnel had appeared at its center. The tunnel led to the miniature world where the legacy of the former master of the Tower of Radiance resided. However, the tunnel was just too small right now. It was only the size of a fist, and it constantly twisted and collapsed, preventing people from entering it. Changyang, why are you here as well? Donglin Yanxue arrived beside Jian Chen with her 8 retainers. She also stared at the twisting space within the valley sternly and said to Jian Chen, "You have to be careful. No matter what happens, you shouldn't approach it. Although you're a great genius, your cultivation is still far too low after all. Once unexpected danger crops up, you'll struggle to protect yourself." Donglin Yanxue's voice was filled with care. Jian Chen remained silent as he stared directly at the valley. He did not say anything. Donglin Yanxue and he were fated to be on different paths in life. If they were too close, he would even end up causing trouble for her. After all, he possessed martial soul force. He was a member of the martial soul lineage, and the martial soul lineage was fated to oppose the Radiant Saint Hall. At the same time, a majestic divine hall stood above the clouds on the desolate plain, looming over everything. Within a sacred hall in the divine hall, over a dozen people had gathered together. There were men and women, and they varied in age. But without a single exception, all of them gave off terrifying presences that were enough to shake up space. They were peak experts who stood at the apex of the plane, the supreme existences who could make the entire plane shake from a few simple gestures. Of course, they were not native to the desolate plane. Instead, they had gathered here from the other planes and planets across the Saints' world for the Inata Tower. After so many years of searching, basically all the cultivators on the desolate plane have been checked. We've all personally peered into the identities of the God Kings and Infinite Primes, but we've failed to find a single trace of Jian Chen, said a golden-robed, burly, middle-aged man. No, we've still missed some people. Out of the God Kings, there are 3 who are undertaking trials within a miniature world, and they still haven't emerged. There are still 6 people below God King, and due to various reasons, we haven't been able to check them. If Jian Chen is on the desolate plane, he must be hiding among the 9 of them. It's just that all 9 of these people come from peak organizations on the desolate plane, and we can't put pressure the native organizations too much. After all, our actions in the past few years have already made them furious. If we really go too far, they'll start resisting, an old woman who sat before the golden-robed man said with a raspy voice. Indeed, we cannot go overboard with the native organizations. If they manage to persuade the Celestial Sword Saint and get him to stand up for them, we'll have bitten off more than we can chew. I've learned about these 9 people in detail. We've managed to investigate the origins of 3 of them. They entered miniature worlds controlled by their clans many years ago to undertake trials, so they're unlikely to be Jian Chen. Out of the remaining 6 people, one of them is the great-grandson of a chaotic prime. He had been heavily injured, and only an incomplete soul remains. As a result, it's impossible for him to be Jian Chen either. In other words, the remaining 5 people are the most suspicious. The last 5 people come from the Radiant Saint Hall, the North River Cult, the Daoist Sect of Origins, the Chaoyang Clan, and the Dao Huang Empire. It's only 5 organizations. We might as well press them forcefully so that they hand over the 5 of them immediately. We'll be able to look into their identities. I don't think that's a good idea. Those from the Dao Huang Empire and the Chaoyang Clan have visited the Sword God Mountains several times already, requesting the Celestial Sword Saint to stand forward for them. I think we shouldn't be too unruly on the desolate plane just in case we displease the Celestial Sword Saint. We've all witnessed the Celestial Sword Saint's strength. Is there anyone who can block a strike from him? Everyone fell silent from that. Ever since they visited the Sword God Mountains together and a peak expert was almost beheaded, they had become fearful of the Celestial Sword Saint. It was also from then on that the outsiders began to hold back, no longer willing to act too recklessly on the desolate plane. In my opinion, we should split up into 5 groups and proceed to the 5 places. We can wait there. Once the 5 people emerge from the miniature worlds, we'll investigate them immediately and get to the bottom of their identities, suggested a white-robed old man after a while of thought. It looks like that's the only thing we can do right now. The experts gathered there reached an agreement very soon. They immediately set off. On the surface, they seemed like they had banded together, but this was only to stand up against the native organizations of the desolate plain. Their objective was just to find Jian Chen. Once Jian Chen was found, their relationship would immediately dissolve, and they would contend against one another for the Inata Tower. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall sat on the throne within the Radiant Saint Hall with an ugly expression. The 8 vice leaders sat below him to the 2 sides. At this moment, the 8 vice leaders sat there with sunken faces as well. They stared at the 3 men in the center with displeasure. You want to stay here for a long period of time for a disciple who hasn't taken the blood test? Humph, what do you think our Radiant Saint Hall is? Barked the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Clearly, he was furious. The 3 men in the center of the hall all possessed tremendous presences. They were experts at the same level as the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Please calm down, leader. We are only doing this for the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. We just want to find Jian Chen sooner so that we can hand over the Inata Tower. The 3 men smiled. They did not care about the leader's fury at all. Changyang is a radiant saint master, so how can he be Jian Chen? You're looking for the wrong person, Xian Zhan growled. He was the only existence among the 8 vice leaders who dared to stand up to the 3 experts. This was because he was only a step away from the same level of cultivation. Who knows when he would break through? Who said fighters can't be radiant saint masters? The martial soul lineage is the best example of that. Regardless, it's still like what we said before. Anyone, as long as they haven't been verified by us, might be Jian Chen in disguise. Humph, what logic. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall snorted coldly. After that, a gleam of light flashed through Xian Zhan's eyes. After some thought, he stood up and said, I'll go watch over the Tower of Radiance. Vice Leader Xian Zhan silently appeared on the top floor of the Sacred Hall, outside the Tower of Radiance. He stood there with his hands behind his back with a steady presence. He stared at the entrance of the Tower of Radiance deeply. There are only 5 people who have not been investigated on the entire desolate plain now. I never thought Changyang would be one of them. Is he really Jian Chen in disguise? Jian Chen is a fighter who possesses strength no less than the supreme God Kings on the God King's throne. If Changyang really is Jian Chen in disguise, he's both a fighter and a radiant saint master. That means, Xian Zhan thought to himself. All the information he knew about Changyang flashed through his head quickly. Afterwards, with a flip of his hand, the bottle that contained a droplet of Xian Ming's blood and the jade slip that recorded a message from Xian Ming appeared. Xian Zhan's gaze gradually deepened as he looked at the 2 items in his hands. The space within the mountain range in the Tower of Radiance continued to distort. Powerful ripples of energy shook up the surroundings. The entrance to the miniature world still had not been opened completely. Now, more and more hallowed saint masters had gathered in the mountain range. Many of them received the news and hurried over as quickly as they could. At least half of the radiant god kings in the Tower of Radiance were present now. There were even more people below Radiant God King. There were figures as far as the eye could see around the mountains. They either stood on the mountains or hovered in the air, all paying attention to the bottom of the valley. At this moment, an even more powerful energy seemed to appear out of thin air. It suddenly descended with a tremendous, churning pressure, completely pouring into the bottom of the valley. With the support of this energy, the gateway seemed to be ripped open by a pair of invisible hands. It immediately became wide open. Immediately, an idyllic, heaven-like world of beauty appeared on the other side of the gateway. It was exposed before everyone without any disguise at all. At that moment, the eyes of all the hallowed saint masters gathered there narrowed. They studied the miniature world with shining eyes, but they all did nothing as if they were afraid of entering it. There had never been records of another miniature world hidden within the sacred pavilion throughout the history of the Radiant Saint Hall, so no one knew anything about it. As a result, they did not dare to act recklessly before confirming the place was safe. They were afraid it was a land filled with danger, which would doom them if they set foot inside. However, there was one exception. Just as all the radiant god kings were hesitating, a white finger condensed a pair of radiant wings and suddenly shot over like an arrow from 10 kilometers away, disappearing through the gateway as a streak of white light. Changyang, what are you doing? The situation inside is unknown. You can't go in, Donglin Yenshue's worried voice rang out from behind. She also condensed a pair of radiant wings to chase after him, but she was already too late to stop him. What courage! He only has a 2-colored soul core, yet he's so bold that he dares to do something we don't. Even a weaker disciple with a mere 2-colored soul core is so fearless, so what are we, Lords of Peaks, waiting for? We really are getting more and more cowardly. Go in. You can't forget this is a world within the Tower of Radiance. The Tower of Radiance is a consecrated item of our Radiant Saint Hall. It's impossible for it to cause us any harm. Like the initial collapsing domino, Jian Chen's actions urged on everyone else. Immediately, the radiant god kings in the surroundings called out and flew over as well, entering the miniature world. But that was not everyone. A small number of radiant god kings continued to hesitate. At this moment, the gateway began to shrink slowly as if it could not last for too long. After Jian Chen entered the gateway, the energy maintaining it had vanished, causing it to close up slowly. At the sight of this, all the hesitating radiant god kings and hallowed saint masters made up their minds and charged into the miniature world in a flash. Donglin Yanxue and her 8 protectors happened to be among them. 10 seconds later, the gate had closed. There were still many hallowed saint masters who had failed to enter the miniature world in time. The miniature world possessed beautiful mountains and clear lakes and rivers. The landscape was breathtaking. It was brimming with life as well, drastically different from the barren world outside. In the center of the miniature world stood an extremely tall stone stele that plunged right into the clouds. Like a pillar that held up the sky, it stood there quietly, keeping heaven and earth separate. It gave off an illuminating, holy light. As soon as Jian Chen entered the miniature world, he was immediately attracted by the huge stele. The light in his eyes flickered as he showed excitement. At the same time, the hallowed saint masters who had entered the miniature world as well appeared one after another. They all stared at the glowing stele in the distance. Chang Yang, you're far too reckless. At this moment, Donglin Yanxue's voice rang out from beside Jian Chen. She did not pay too much attention to the stele once she entered the miniature world. Instead, she looked for Jian Chen first and seemed like she was lecturing him. Jian Chen looked away from the stele and at Donglin Yanxue. He frowned slightly and said, "Be careful later. Don't travel too far away from them. It's best if you stay with your auntie." Donglin Yanshue's heart immediately warmed up when she heard Jian Chen's words. However, she maintained a stern expression and said, "The person who should be careful is you. You can't forget that I already have a 5-colored soul core now, while you only have a 2-colored soul core." She paused and glanced around before continuing, "There are so many radiant god kings here. Once a conflict starts, you'll struggle to protect yourself with your strength. Just the shockwaves will threaten your life. Don't travel too far away from me. Stay with me." Jian Chen sighed inside from that. He glanced at Donglin Yanxue with mixed feelings and no longer said anything more aloud. Instead, he communicated with her secretly so that only she could hear him. "Donglin Yanxue, we are people who belong on separate paths in life. It's best if you sever the relationship between us. Before, it was only a deal. Now that our deal has been completed, our relationship ends here as well. Everything will return to how it was before. Just treat it like you never knew me." As if she had been struck by a bolt of lightning, Donglin Yanxue jolted after hearing that. She stared at Jian Chen in some confusion and said with a rather trembling voice, What did you say?" At that moment, Donglin Yanxue suddenly felt a stinging pain in her heart. "This is the best for you. You will understand very soon." With that, Jian Chen directly flew towards the stele in the distance. "Master, this is the stele of ways left behind by the former master of the Tower of Radiance. His legacy imprint is suppressed beneath the stele of ways. Only by comprehending the stele and gaining its recognition can you call out the legacy." At this moment, the artifact spirit's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. The artifact spirit had expended far too much energy, making him extremely feeble. Even his voice clearly sounded weak. He would stammer as if it was extremely difficult for him to say this. "Master, I need to recover some power. I won't be able to help you with the following." With that, the artifact spirit's voice vanished completely. Chapter 2340, The Final Victor. 1. Jian Chen had already arrived before the stele that seemed to hold up the sky here. He studied it carefully. The stele seemed to be made out of rock or jade. It was pure white and flawless, illuminating the surroundings with holy light. A profound power that seemed to represent the supreme laws of the world circulated within the stele, causing the people who stood before it to feel like they were facing a boundless world. They could not help but feel reverence. This stele actually isn't made out of any physical material at all. Instead, it was condensed from tremendous laws of the hallowed by the past master of the Tower of Radiance, the terrifying existence who was on par with grand exalts. No wonder it's called a stele of ways. It's a form of the power of ways. Jian Chen understood the origins of the stele very soon and was immediately amazed. Using the ways of the world to condense a stele was so terrifying that superhuman could no longer describe it. Probably only grand exalts who had comprehended the laws to the limit could accomplish such an impossible task. Heavens, the entire stele is condensed from the power of the laws of the hallowed. This is just too unbelievable. Who was the one who created this stele? His grasp over the laws of the hallowed have actually reached such an unbelievable degree. I understand now. The stele was actually left behind by the master of the Tower of Radiance, the senior recorded in the annals of the Tower of Radiance. He is someone who is on par with grand exalts. Is this miniature world the place where the master of the Tower of Radiance resided? There has always been a rumor that the Tower of Radiance possesses a grand exalt's cultivation method, but no one has witnessed it in all these years. Do you think this grand exalt's cultivation method is hidden in this miniature world? At this moment, many hallowed saint masters gathered around the stele. They all studied it with burning interest. There were many clever people among them, so they guessed the secret of this place very soon. Donglin Yanxue had approached the stele with her 8 retainers as well. However, she did not go to find Jian Chen this time. Instead, she stood beside Donglin Qiushui, looking at Jian Chen from afar. She was dejected. Even the rumor of the grand exalt's cultivation method was unable to interest her. Yanxue, it's highly likely that an extremely impressive fortuitous encounter is hidden here. You have to make good use of this opportunity and do your best to obtain it. Donglin Qiushui's excited voice rang out. Her complete attention had been placed on the stele. She did not notice Donglin Yanxue's abnormalities. Jian Chen had already sat down now. His eyes were closed as he comprehended the stele with his full efforts. He had already learnt from the artifact spirit that the Grand Exalt's legacy was suppressed beneath the stele. Only by comprehending the mysteries of the stele and gaining its recognition could one take out the legacy. Many of the hallowed saint masters sat down around the stele too and started comprehending its mysteries. They did not know that the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint was suppressed beneath it. They only knew the stele was completely condensed from the laws of the hallowed. It hid the endless truths of the world. As a result, even if they comprehended just a sliver of it, they would be able to benefit greatly. Of course, not everyone gathered around the stele. A portion of the hallowed saint masters were scattered throughout the miniature world. They searched it carefully, scouring every inch in search of a fortuitous encounter for themselves. Jian Chen completely submerged himself in the comprehension of the stele. The power of laws hidden within the stele was like a tremendous ocean to him. It was boundless and immeasurable. After all, this had been left behind by a grand exalt. It represented the limits of the laws of the hallowed. Its depth and level were far beyond what Jian Chen could touch upon. As a result, Jian Chen became lost as soon as he began his comprehension. Like a lost child, he could not find his way. Fortunately, the laws of the hallowed within the stele were extremely gentle. It did not possess any hostile power at all. It was like a benevolent mother who cared for her child. Hence, no matter how weak the radiant saint masters were, they were not harmed at all. As a result, Jian Chen found his way very soon as he was surrounded by a mysterious power. After finding his way, Jian Chen immediately discovered that he could see a diagram containing the mysteries of the ways. It shone brightly, invoking everything in the world. At the same time, an ancient consciousness suddenly appeared in Jian Chen's head. It revealed a piece of information. Comprehending the diagram would allow one to obtain the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. At the same time, the hallowed saint masters who sat around the stele as they tried to comprehend its mysteries experienced the same thing as Jian Chen. After becoming temporarily lost, they saw the diagram and received the ancient message as well, learning about the legacy. Immediately, all of them were shocked by this discovery. They ravished with joy. Yanxue, comprehend the stele, quick. There's a huge fortune hidden within the stele, Donglin Qiushui said to Donglin Yanxue in a hurry before immediately comprehending the diagram. Jian Chen also comprehended the diagram that had suddenly appeared. He began to compete with the various radiant god kings in the surroundings in a battle of comprehension. At the same time, rays of light shone from the stele, enveloping all the people comprehending the diagram. The light was protective. Anyone comprehending the diagram received its protection. Time passed silently, and Jian Chen's comprehension of the diagram rapidly deepened. 10%. 20%. 30%. A whole month had passed, and Jian Chen had comprehended 50% of the diagram. Comprehending the diagram had nothing to do with personal strength. The mysteries within the diagram truly tested the talent and potential of a person. The greater their talent and potential, the faster they could comprehend the diagram. During this time, all the hallowed saint masters who were originally scattered across the miniature world discovered the secret behind the stele one after another. They all gathered around the stele, comprehending the stele to the best of their abilities. As a result, all the hallowed saint master who had entered the miniature world had gathered around the stele. Without any exception, all of them were in a state of comprehension, contending for the Grand Exalt's legacy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.